everybody. Good morning. Call the meeting to order. My name is Eileen Duff. I am the host counselor for the hearing. To start, I will read the letter of nomination from the governor. Dear counselors, I am pleased to nominate Raquel D. Ruano to the position of Associate Justice of the District Court. I submit this nomination for the advice and consent of the Executive Council pursuant to Part 2, Chapter 2 of the Constitution of the Commonwealth of Massachusetts. I'm enclosing the nominee's resume for your convenience. And so to start the hearing, we will call the people who are here to witness, your witnesses on your behalf, and the first is the Honorable Matthew Matura. And you can come, sit, stand, whatever makes you comfortable.
Since I sit for a living, I'll sit. Good morning, everyone. It's always a great honor to be asked to come up here. It's probably one of the greatest honors I've had. I didn't even know that I was going through the process, and I got a call one day. Can you speak on my behalf? I'm like, on behalf of what? She says, I've been nominated to the district court. And I said, I would be honored. You know, you're fortunate in this business to come along superstars. And I just left the Suffolk DA's office and started out in private practice. I was scared to death because I had left a very comfortable place that I knew. And I walked into Chelsea District Court to do my first duty day. And one of the first people I met was Attorney Ruano. I have a piece of paper, not because I have a lot to say. I have a piece of paper to say as little as possible because there's so much I could say about this nominee. Her legal talents are beyond reproach. But the most unbelievable thing about her is her temperament. If you walked into Chelsea Court and she didn't have a smile on her face, I would go home because something was wrong with the world. She treated everybody with dignity and respect. And being a prosecutor is one of the most powerful things you could ever do. But she showed mercy and compassion and had an absolute, what she wanted to do was to really help people. And what you see before you here today, and I wish everybody could see this, this is what the American dream looks like. Those of us and our grandparents and my parents who came from somewhere else, who started all over with nothing. The legacy that they leave behind are their children and their grandchildren. And I can't think of a better example of the American dream than the nominee that sits before you today. And it is an honor to be here on her behalf. And I am really, really looking forward to you hopefully coming to our region to work with you.
Thank you, Judge. Councilor Devaney.
How nice to see you.
Always great to see you guys.
One of my most proud vote. I through the years, and I've come to your courthouse, and I'm so proud of you. And what you said is very meaningful. And as you know, my parents were both Italian immigrants, so I know what you went through. And you are an immigrant. She is an immigrant, which is wonderful. What a wonderful thing to become a judge, to come through the system. So tell me, how long have you known this nominee?
I left the DA's office in '94, so probably like, when was the DA's office?
2000, I don't know, it was 2004.
So since 2004, it's a long time. And I'm happy to say we've kept in touch when she left the office. And
Judge, what comes to mind when you look back when she appeared before you? Was there something, was there one case that comes to mind that you could tell us about?
what struck me most about her was the way she treated me as a defense attorney. You know, it's an acrimonious relationship and sometimes things can get heated, but that's not the way she treated anybody. She treated defense attorneys like they were their coworkers. Everybody was treated with dignity and respect, and there's no question in my mind that she's going to recognize that people that are in court are probably as scared as they've ever been, and it's probably one of their worst days. There's no question in my mind that that person's going to leave that court, regardless of what the decision is, knowing that they were treated fairly and with dignity.
Well, that's all you want, to go out there. What happens that I was treated fair, but what a pleasure to have you. What an honor for this nominee to have you testify.
The honor is mine.
Thank you, Judge. So good to see you.
All right, thank you.
Madam Chair, if I may.
Councilor Kennedy, sorry.
Yes. Good morning. My apologies for not being there in person. It's our usual practice not to put hearings on school vacation week. However, Councilor Duff and Councilor Jubenville asked us, for those of us that were going to be going away, if it would be okay, and we certainly did. And I apologize for the Hawaiian shirt I'm wearing, Judge, but I'm sitting by the pool at this time. I just want to say that your comments and your support obviously mean a great deal. You're somebody that I certainly have a great deal of respect for and appear in front of frequently. You do a great job, and I appreciate your comments. That's all.
Thank you, Councilor Iannello.
I don't have any questions. You have such a fine reputation. I think it's very deserving. You're doing a great job, and continue the great work.
Thank you so much. It means the world.
Thank you, Judge. All right.
I'd just like to say one thing. I know you guys are pressed for time, but I'd just like to speak about the other nominee, who I've known for almost 30 years. You will not find a better lawyer or a more decent human being than John Pappas. So I wish him all the best as well.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Okay, our next witness is Dan Rivera, the president and CEO of Mass Development, the former mayor of Lawrence, and someone that I've known for a while and have the deepest and greatest respect for. Good witness.
Thank you, councilors. I'll start with kind of our history. I've known Raquel for over 7 years, during which time she worked at the city of Lawrence as a city attorney. During this period, I've known her to be an enthusiastic litigator, hardworking, have a high level of integrity, with excellent communication skills. She successfully tried many diverse cases for the city of Lawrence. She came in at a time where the mayor before me was having a hard time of it, let's just say. And she was one of the attorneys to keep the city on the straight and narrow. Some of the cases were multi-million-dollar contract cases, federal civil rights cases, personal injury lawsuits. Throughout these cases, it was evident that Raquel had commitment and dedication to research and become well-versed in any type of case that she had to handle. In addition, Raquel has been one of my trusted advisors as her knowledge and candor has always been in the best interest of the city. She's able to analyze issues from several different viewpoints in order to advise on the best course of action, and her advice was always practical and well-reasoned. It was invaluable to me as we tried to manage a city like Lawrence in tough times. Finally, just Raquel's ability to show empathy and find ways to use her legal ability to help is unmatched. She's worked through 2 very significant and life-changing events for the city and myself, the gas explosions of September 13th and the COVID-19 pandemic. Through both of these challenges, Raquel was able to find creative ways within the law for the city to help its residents overcome these traumatic events. She was instrumental in negotiating settlement with Columbia Gas in order for the city to rebuild. She also helped build and draft contracts that brought about racial equity for COVID-19 testing, vaccines in the city of Lawrence. Raquel, a daughter of immigrants, has shown many qualities that not only would be beneficial as a member of the judiciary, but also to any community for which the district court serves. Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you, Council. Thank you for coming. Your testimony means a lot to me. Tell me, does one thing come to mind when you think of what this nominee has done for racial equity?
Well, you can imagine that we have an immigrant community where 75% of the population speaks primarily Spanish. And for them to come to the mayor's office and find somebody who speaks Spanish is kind of always, because we got elected, so they find somebody that speaks Spanish. But for somebody to have a case, their child got hurt on a playground, or they have a problem with a police officer, and to show up to the Lawrence City Attorney's office and find someone that understood their language, understood their plight, was invaluable. And that happened time after time after time. It made the constituent services work for us a little less because she could deal with them in a way we didn't have to get involved. But that female Latin American descent in Lawrence to help with primarily people of Latin American descent was invaluable.
Well, thank you. I appreciate your testimony.
Thank you.
Anyone else? All right, thank you, Mr. Rivera. Is there anyone else here to testify on behalf? the candidate? No. Anyone to testify against the candidate?
You have that was a
Counselor
marijuana,
Duff,
that was on my
Yeah,
jersey.
oh,
and
yes,
crap.
Council Hurley?
my Wi-Fi is down. I'm gonna
Okay.
keep trying, but I'm on my phone.
I
I just
see
want to
that.
let you know, I have been listening to the witness's testimony, and I will try and get on with the video as well if I can, but we're having a bad windy day out here, and it's somehow affecting the Wi-Fi.
That's
Thank you.
okay, Counselor. Thank you for letting us know. No one here to testify against? Okay. We will have your statement now. Before you begin, if you'd like to introduce anyone that you brought with you, you're very welcome to.
So I'll start on this end. So I have my sisters. I have Heather and Ashley Ruano. I have my stepmother, Wilma Ruano. I have my parents-in-law, my father-in-law, Willie Valcourt and Linda Valcourt. And then over here, I have my sister, Andrea Ruano, my mother, Dora Asia, my husband, Matthew Valcourt, and my father, Jose Ruano.
Thank you very much, and you may give your statement.
Thank you. I wanted to start off, obviously, by thanking this Executive Council and its staff for having me here today. I also wanted to thank Governor Charlie Baker and Lieutenant Governor Karen Polito for nominating me as an Associate Justice. Along with the JNC and the Judicial Bar Council, they have been very supportive and guiding me through this path. I wanted to obviously thank the two witnesses that came, Dan Rivera and the Honorable Matthew Mashera, for coming forward and being witnesses on my behalf. Although they are not here, I would also like to thank my children. I have 3 kids who, obviously, for obvious reasons, are not here today, but with them, as well as everybody here that's in this room, I can honestly say that I wouldn't be where I am, either personally or professionally. I did have a little birdie tell me last night that this would be live streamed. So I do have a link besides who you see in this room, all of my family is in Guatemala. So if you would just indulge me, just so I can say, gracias familia por todo su apoyo, te amo con todo mi corazón. So a little bit about myself that's not on the CV that the governor provided for you. As you have heard, I was born in Guatemala. My parents actually were neighbors, and they met, and then when they got married, my father had been in medical school, and he had decided to come to the United States to do his residency. So that was, a decision that completely changed our lives. We lived in Texas for a little bit, where my sister Andrea was born, and then we subsequently moved up here to Massachusetts. When we came up here, my father started a private medical practice in the Boston neighborhood of Jamaica Plain, which at that time was a significantly Hispanic community. And he was able to provide that community with the access of care that they deserved, but in a language that they understood. And so he was able to build the trust of the community. Similarly, my mother has always been a real estate broker. She has always worked in a minority community. She's always tried to find their forever homes, and she has been so helpful into trying, to expand the real estate world for new home buyers. And especially those who, just like us, have just moved to the United States. So I think from them, I really learned the basic core that you have the power to use what God gave you to kind of help the people around you. And that's not something that I think they told me specifically, but it's what they do, and it's what they've instilled in not only my sister Andrea, but also Ashley and Heather. When I first came out of law school, I was a law clerk for the Superior Court Justices. And it was at that point where I knew that I wanted to be in the courtroom. We traveled around to different counties, and when I sat in a civil session or a criminal session where I saw motions to suppress and I saw trials, I knew that's exactly where I belonged. I loved how people were helped, how problems were solved. And so straight after my law clerk, I decided to join the Suffolk County District Attorney's Office. When I first joined, I was asked by my then supervisor, who's now the Honorable Stacy White, what court I wanted to be in. Not really knowing all the different courts, I knew immediately that I wanted to go to Chelsea. I thought that just being a bilingual prosecutor would be very beneficial, as at that time we didn't really have a lot of bilingual victim witness advocates in the office. And I just thought that, to deal not only with pro se defendants or even victims, it would be really helpful to have somebody who spoke Spanish. My time there was invaluable. I learned, obviously, the basics of what a district court does, the motions to suppress, trial. I was a team prosecutor for the drug court there that was run by the now retired Justice Diana Maldonado. And so I learned even not, I did a little bit of juvenile, I did regular criminal, but also the drug court. So besides the basics of the district court, I think I also learned an invaluable lesson that it really isn't about winning or losing. It really is about how can you bring justice to the case that is before you. And I had the judges that were sitting there and my supervisors and my mentors who really made that tenet obvious. And it is something that I've carried with me through all my positions. I left the DA's office to join the Corporation Counsel's office in Boston. And there I felt like I was still able to use my knowledge of criminal law because it really intersected with the civil law that I practiced there, as I did a lot of civil rights cases that involve wrongful arrests, excessive use of force. And so my criminal background really came into play at that time. Having moved from the city of Boston, I moved up north to Essex County, and that is where I opened up my own private practice. As a solo practitioner, I was district court certified, and I was assigned to the Lynn District Court. Again, it was a court that I chose for very specific reasons that I'm sure you can see a pattern. My family chooses locations on where to open up their practice because of who they can serve, and I have similarly chosen the courts that I wanted to practice in the belief that I can be of great service there. Concurrently, I was working part-time for the city of Lawrence as a assistant city solicitor, and I was there until about 2018 when I was in the acting, and then officially in 2019 when I was appointed as the city attorney. You've heard a little bit from the witnesses about some of the things that I have done for the city of Lawrence, but I do think that they are important in that I do the litigation where I'm dealing with personal injury and all of that, but there is a lot of it that does have to deal with the community. And it was incidences that no one could have ever prepared you for, like the Columbia gas incident. Nobody anticipated that was coming. But nevertheless, it was really a time where I could use my legal abilities to figure out ways to create contracts and create scenarios where the families that had been displaced can be placed in Lawrence so that they wouldn't have to leave the community or their neighborhood, where the children didn't have to take buses for 30 or 45 minutes to go to their neighborhood schools. I remember, just because of the timing, it happened in September, many people were not yet in their homes for Thanksgiving. And so we volunteered that day to give out Thanksgiving meals to those that had been displaced. And then shortly thereafter, we were faced with the COVID pandemic. And it was at that time that, we realized that Lawrence had a huge population that were essential workers. They were the ones that were there working in the supermarkets. They were the ones working in the warehouses to make sure that everything was shipped. And they were the ones, unfortunately, that were getting COVID in highest rates possible. And we worked together, as Mayor Rivera said, to create racial equities in testing at first until there was some sort of a vaccination. And then when the vaccination became available, to prioritize and get racial equity for vaccinations. And those are really the times where I do feel that I am truly a lawyer, that I am doing what, I've been taught, but also not only in law school, but also by my parents. I do. So in closing, I wanted to say I do have a lot to offer to the district court, given that I've done both criminal and civil. And in both scenarios, I have done both sides of the V. I've done prosecution, I have defense, I've done plaintiff's work, and I have defendant's work. And I feel like that is something that it is a need in the district courts, and I'd be able to fill that. I know some of you have reached out to me to ask me a little bit about my background, and I'm thankful for your time, but I'm willing to answer any other questions or concerns that you may have about my qualifications.
Thank you very much, Attorney Ruano. I'm going to start with Counselor Terence Kennedy.
Good morning. First, I apologize for not being there in person. As I said earlier, it's a normal practice to not put hearings on school vacation week, but in the interest of moving things along and how busy we were, Councilor Duff and Jubenville asked if it'd be okay if they could, and we all agreed. I think it's important that councilors be there live. I think this is probably the 5th hearing in 12 years that I haven't been there live. And I apologize for that at the outset. I have to say that you seem far too young to have that vast amount of experience that you just outlined, and you do have a lot. But I do have a couple of questions I want to ask you, starting with this. How many years have you been working for for the City of Lawrence and Mayor Rivera, former Mayor Rivera?
I started there in 2013, so I'm short of 10 years.
Okay, so it's been 10 years since you have handled any criminal cases in the district court, fair to say?
No. So when I first started for the City of Lawrence, I was started in a part-time capacity and I still had my private practice. In my private practice, that's where I was a bar advocate in Lynn, and I had my private practice until I was formally appointed as a city attorney, so up until 2019.
Okay, so a few years, not too long. That's good. So let me ask you this. You've been on both sides of the fence. You've been a prosecutor. You've been a defense lawyer, and I think that's a great combination. And you have a very rare quality, having done civil work. But I want to specifically ask you about dangerousness hearings. There's been a lot in the news recently about Governor Baker's new bill on dangerousness. Do you think that dangerousness hearings are overused by prosecutors?
I'm sorry, just because I have trouble just.
Dangerousness hearings. Do you think petitions to have people held as dangerous are being overused in the state by prosecutors?
Well, I do believe that it is a tool that the prosecutors can use, and I do believe that as a judge, one of the ways that you can temper the motions that get brought before you is because you do have to do a balancing test. You would have to balance, obviously, the factors that are enumerated in the legislature for a dangerousness hearing, but at the same time, you would have to balance the defendant's rights. And I think that that's where it is important to have the judicial system kind of step in, because you aren't going to be able to stop the prosecutors from filing those motions, but you will be the final arbiter on whether or not somebody is held under that statute.
But my question is, are too many of them being filed?
I mean, I've seen a lot of them filed. I think that sometimes it's a little different in different counties, but there are some counties where they are used more than
Okay. Fair enough. Okay, so the governor's bill provides for an expansion of dangerous hearings. Some parts of it I actually agree with. We all agree that people accused of child rape or indecent assault and battery on a child or even child pornography should be subjected to potentially dangerousness hearings and held if it's shown that they present a danger, which under those circumstances, there would certainly be grave concern that they might. But it also expands the opportunity for prosecutors to bring dangerousness hearings after the first day of arraignment. Do you agree with that? That they should be able to do it at any time during the process? I mean, wouldn't that continue the overfiling and abuse of dangerousness hearings?
I think it does have the potential to do that because it really is based on the facts of the case, and sometimes most of the facts of the case at the time. And I understand the reasoning why the governor wanted to expand it for that reason, but I do agree that it can now expand it because it's just supposed to be for a certain amount of time. And if you compound that with bail, you are going to have situations where defendants are held for or have even the ability to be held at any point, and that I think can really infringe on a defendant's rights.
Okay, let's talk about conditions of release. You've obviously had to deal with them over the years as a defense lawyer and as a prosecutor prior to that. Do you think that we overuse conditions of release? I mean, they can be substantial restrictions on people's liberty. I can tell you that I spend probably 30% of my time addressing conditions of release that there's accusations of violations that I don't believe in many cases are well-founded or warrants go out for people because of minor infractions? What's your position with respect to the use of conditions of release? And by that, I mean curfews, GPS monitoring to enforce curfews and keep people away from people, inability to travel out of state because they have equipment related to either a GPS or a scram, that type of thing. Do you think they're overused?
I do think they're overused. I think it's something that I didn't really realize until I became a defense attorney. I think the real life consequences that they are to the defense aren't really known unless it's your client, and you have to try and make sure your client doesn't violate that. I do believe that any conditions of release should be narrowly tailored to that specific set of facts, and I think sometimes they are used in an overgeneralized way.
Okay, and with respect to violations of conditions of release, do you think they should automatically result in people being incarcerated? For example, somebody's on a GPS because they're told to stay away from a certain person, might be a domestic violence case, might be some other type of violence case. So you put them on a GPS to keep them away from a person, and then they get arrested for not operating after suspension. Should they be revoked?
I don't believe in, something should be an automatic incarcerated factor. I do believe that everything should be weighed with the different factors that are before you, but I don't believe in an automatic jail.
Okay. You're familiar with the jury selection process. You've impaneled juries in the past, right?
I have.
How many jury trials would you say you've done?
When I was,
Best guess.
I would say between 30 and 50.
Okay, that's probably 8 or 10 times more than most of the people that we see come before us. And with respect to civil trials, how many civil trials would you say you've done?
I counted those in my numbers, but I would probably, for civil trials, I would have done at least 10.
And that's pretty amazing too. Most people don't do both in this day and age. I had the misfortune of selecting a jury one time in in Newburyport, where I was stuck with trying to choose between eliminating a police officer or this other individual because I ran out of challenges. And I kept the other individual on and excluded the police officer. I apparently should have kept the police officer since Mayor Rivera decided my client was guilty. But I'm going to leave you with that. I think you're a great candidate, and I look forward to voting on you when I return to St. Martin next week. I will be voting in favor.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Kennedy. Councilor Hurley.
Hi, thank you. Unfortunately, I don't get to see you in person, and you don't get to see me. I'm still trying to get on, but the best I can do is my phone. Many of the questions that Councilor Kennedy asked you, I asked you when I talked to you over the phone, and my impressions were the same in that you have both sides of the equation, the civil and the criminal, which is a real plus. Having been a mayor myself and having also worked in the city solicitor's office in Springfield, I understand full well the range of different types of cases that would come before you in the city solicitor's office. So I really don't have any other questions. I'm glad you brought all your family there. I'm sure they're over the moon and thrilled with your nomination. I think you're going to do a great job. The fact that you're multilingual really is a plus, having been on the district court and oftentimes struggling to try and get an interpreter. What I did a lot was call on the phone to get somebody out of Boston because there wasn't somebody available. So you've got all of the qualities that's going to make you a great judge, and I will be voting for you next week. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Council Hurley. I do want to just tag on to this, even though I'm going a little bit out of order, that Council Hurley and I spoke very in depth about you and exactly what she referenced is she's sitting here in a unique position as a former mayor, a judge, and someone who's actually done a lot of what you've done. I think she has more of an eagle's eye view to some of this stuff than others because of her background, so. Council Jubenville. I don't,
Council Ferrara?
is Council Ferrara on?
Oh, it's not there. Okay.
Council Jubenville.
Thank you for your statement. I see you went to Holy Cross.
Yeah.
We have another Holy Cross graduate in our room, works for us, Aaron Thomas over there, who's doing a heck of a job for us.
Staters.
Help in the room. We have a BC graduate too, so there's a lot of friction going on here.
Go to BC Law, so I.
Oh, no, you see.
Yes.
So let me ask you, did you read or are you familiar with the study about racism in our court system?
I did.
What do you think of that?
It was really eye-opening, but I think it hit the nail on the head. I mean, the study was really about how it really comes from the charging. And, you know, defendants are charged differently, so therefore defendants are faced with different courts where their cases are going to be tried and therefore faced with different penalties that they face. And so it really leads to a really big racial disparity. And as I stated, I thought it was eye-opening, but it was definitely well thought out, and the metrics were there, and I'm hoping that the judicial system is able to do something about that.
Well, yeah, that's part of it, charging, there's no question about it, but there were other parts of it too. And one of them had to do with the amount of minority individuals who are incarcerated or as a percentage of the population. And who puts people in jail? So shouldn't we be looking at that?
We should, yeah, of course. I mean, I think everyone plays a role in how the cases ultimately end up, but the decision will ultimately rest on a judge.
So the study came up with only one word for why we have this great discrepancy. Only one word. You know what word that was? Racism. So glad you have the background you have. But be the type of judge who sides with the government, puts people in jail, or are you going to be independent of the government?
I'm planning to be independent. I think that my background has shown that I have seen both sides of it. And I don't necessarily go one side versus the other. I've learned things as an attorney for the government, but I've also learned a lot of things as an attorney for the people that come before the courts that don't have the power and the money that come from being on the government side. And I think that experience would lend me to be more of an independent judge, should I be sitting.
Well, there would be a great deal of pressure on you as a judge, side with them. And I have seen people come to this body and say, oh, I'm going to be independent. You said, sitting on the bench and that pressure is put on them. And side with that. And you get a reputation, government judge. So I think you have to be ready to be strong when you're on that bench. Bold. Remember that nobody can fire you but the governor and governor's council. So too many judges seem to fall into the routine of it's easier to side with the government. There's less criticism of me if I do that. It's a safe way to go. So I kind of, I don't know whether you're telling me strong enough that you're going to be able to do that.
Well, obviously, I don't have any experience with that specific type of pressure, but I do think that working in jobs where there is a political head, I mean, I think the district attorney's office, you do have a boss that runs for office. When you work for the city of Boston or you work for the city of Lawrence, you do have a boss that runs for office. And I think that I have never shied away from nevertheless trying to stay true to what's right, despite knowing that there are political pressures that may want me to give a different result. So while I haven't exactly been in that exact position, I do know what it is like to get pressure on how people would like to see things turn out. And I do believe that I have stayed true and that I am honest and I am always trying to do what is the right and the just thing.
Well, the right and the just thing, I've heard that statements up here all the time. I hear the statement, I'm going to follow the law. Did you ever hear that statement? I don't know what that means, so tell me what that means to you.
And I think what it means to me is that we have, the separation of powers, and I don't create the law. I am, as a judge, I would be charged with following that law, and you want to stay within the bounds of what is permissible, but also you need to temper that with, any compassion or any empathy that you may have, because
Have you ever been to the appeals court?
to argue once,
Like 3 judges up there?
yes.
So in a lot of cases, the decision is made, 2 judges vote one way and 1 judge votes the other. So which judges aren't following the law there?
I think there's interpretations, and I think that
So the word you just used is the word that I think is so important. District court judges do not follow the law. Done the right interpretation of the law. So you get to interpret the law at your level. You followed the law, we wouldn't need appeals court judges. So I can go into one courtroom, get a ruling in the exact same set of facts. I can go into another court and get a different one. So you will control how you interpret the law. And you can interpret it either in a government way or a defendant's way. Government has to prove the case beyond a reasonable doubt. So there are some judges who always interpret it in a government way. So I said,
if I've heard, yes, I agree. I think there are reputations.
have you heard the word judge shopping?
It's when people look for the judges they believe are going to interpret the law in a way or favor their client.
And how I as a lawyer, how do I do that?
If I were to do it, I would read decisions, read past decisions on very
I
similar.
go into the district court and I have a client. How do I shop for a judge?
I think that maybe we would base it off what the people that are there day in, day out. I mean, they are the ones that see this judge.
Yeah, but when I walk into the district court, I go to the clerk's office and I say, what session am I in? And they tell me you're in session B.
Now,
I go to session B, there's a judge. I don't know who the judge is going to be coming out. So how am I going to judge shop?
I mean, you do get the judge that's assigned to that session, and you could always ask for a continuance in the hopes that the next time you're there, you get a different judge. But a lot of the times you have the judge that's assigned to that session.
So I don't know, I don't know how to judge child after 43 years of doing it. I can't go to somebody and say, hey, I don't like the judge in courtroom B. Can you take my case and send it to courtroom C? I don't have the ability to do that. I don't think any court official is going to do that. So, have you done any jury waived cases in the district court?
I have, yes. I've done, when I was a prosecutor, we had a firearms case and in a car accident case, a negligent operation. So I have had some jury waive trials.
And how did you decide whether or not were you a prosecutor or a defendant?
Prosecutor.
Okay. So, how do you decide whether, as a defense lawyer, we get to choose a jury waive trial or a jury trial? So, how do I choose whether or not I'm going to go forward with a jury waive trial with a particular judge?
I mean, the way I've analyzed it was never really based on a judge. It was really based on what are, in my case, or a legal case or more of a fact-specific case. Because I think that there are some cases that the facts might skew what the actual law is if you were to have a jury versus a judge. So that would have been my analysis.
My analysis is on whether or not the judge can say not guilty. Because I know judges that have sat for many years in the Commonwealth who have never, ever once said not guilty. Never. So why would I ever subject my client to a judge at a jury waive trial with somebody who has never said not guilty?
Think you could? I don't think you could.
Malpractice, effective assistance, wouldn't it?
I think it would be.
So, are you going to be the type of judge that I hear about? And when I go to your court that you're in, I'm in your session to have a trial, and the lawyer says, nah, no, she'll never say not guilty. She always sides with the government.
I will not be.
Isn't it a sad reflection on somebody who's a judicial officer that the reputation of that person is such that they never say not guilty?
Doesn't sound like impartiality.
Well, it doesn't sound like you have the guts to say not guilty. As a result, your reputation is such that you're not fair. I think that's an awful way to have a reputation.
I agree.
So, us lawyers, defense lawyers, always talk about judges. You know that.
I was one, yes.
So when we sit in the courtroom, we say, what about this judge? We talk about you. So I hope that you would be one that would be able to have the courage, because it takes courage, especially if the case is a sensitive one. But if the government doesn't reach the verdict that you would say that, you think you're going to have the courage to do that?
I will. I think I'm going to face a lot of cases that I may not agree with by even not like the facts, but nevertheless, interpretation of the law is going to be what it is. I think I will do my best, and I think I will be able to really be
Well,
impartial.
I find judges to be two types of people. They either look for every way possible to find somebody guilty in a case, or they look for every way they can to find reason out in a case to help the citizen in the Commonwealth. How much time do I have left?
You have about 3 minutes.
you ever heard of judges that locked up lawyers?
Maybe anecdotally, but I've never seen it in practice.
Well, I hope you never do that, because it will be a black mark you'll carry with you on the bench for the rest of your career. Things get so bad that if that's crossing your mind, I would suggest you take a recess. Talk to some other lawyers about what to do about it, or other judges about what to do with it, rather than to make that decision. That's the worst decision you can make in your career. What do you think of the probation fees?
I think they can be exorbitant, and I believe that it really prohibits defendants from actually being successful at probation.
So there's a probation witness fee, they call it a probation supervision fee of $65 a month. You know what the probationers get for supervision?
Phone call. At best.
Peeing into a cup. They get charged $75, $65 a month. And they don't have the money to pay it. So a lot of lawyers are asking judges to waive those fees. Some judges waive them without any issue, and some do not. Just remember, the people that you're waiving for don't have the money to pay. So then they get defaulted, then they get probation surrendered. Creates a lot more work in the system. And they just don't have the money. So remember that. You're going to be making a beautiful salary. You'll have a wonderful medical plan and a superb pension when you retire. The people in front of you will never have any of that. Be kind. It doesn't cost you anything to waive probation fees. And nobody can do anything to you. Thank you, thank you.
Council Devaney.
Thank you. Before I'm timed, I want to thank Councilor Duff for allowing this nominee for the most important day of her life outside of getting married and coming to this country and getting married and having children to come to this hearing before us. And you allowed her to bring 10 people, her family, her friends. So I thank you. I thank you for that.
Please answer the questions. Honestly, the State House is open.
Before we have timed, as personal privilege, I would say
Counselor, you're taking your time.
15 minutes. So you're not allowed to give a lot of remarks that I think you should be able to. Our last hearings, the judge, D'Angelo, was allowed to bring no one. He only could come alone. No mother, 6 children, wife, no one here. I got calls from judges.
Is there a question?
I'm sorry, Counselor, you are using your time. Right.
No one was here, he was alone. This is a public hearing, and this is what it should be. And I have a right to speak on that. But to be limited to 15 minutes, I was speaking at a hearing asking a nominee, and the nominee was cut off because it was 15 minutes. Was the federal judge that was just appointed cut off at 15 minutes? The people have a right to know. But our last meeting was not public, so people didn't know how this man was discriminated against. I have no more words. Okay, first of all, I want to thank you for meeting with me. It came so fast. You only had about 4 business days, and we met on Patriots Day. Okay? I gave up my Patriots Day because it was important, my due diligence, that I've met with everyone in 22 years, and it was such a pleasure. It was such a pleasure, and you came. So I want to thank you for that. And you know, I always talk about empathy, and I say I won't help anyone if they don't have empathy or compassion. And I always laugh because I always ask the nominee, and one right after another, what did the chair of the JNC, Dacier, ask you? Definition of empathy. Only question he asked every single hearing. Enough said about that. How I saw your empathy was the things that you have done when that disaster hit Oh, I want to say you had great witnesses. You had the mayor, former mayor, and one of my favorite judges. But when they had that disaster, and the 18-year-old was killed, and it was awful, you were there. What a wonderful thing. You could speak Spanish. You could help these people who had nothing, who were desolate. And I want to thank your mother as a single mother. And as a mother of four, I really understand how hard that must have been. And she brought up the family, and look what she did with you. I mean, she inspired you that you could do this in this country. So you helped those people, and tell us what you did during that time.
Well, yeah, so at that time, you know, it was kind of overnight, you had everything shifted. And it was really just trying to, I think, figure out how do we return some form of normal to the families. I have never had to leave my home, much less immediately without any possessions. And this is exactly what they did. And, you know, these people, you know, everybody kind of lived in neighborhoods where they knew they had other family members and they had nowhere to go. And it wasn't, you know, a house fire where maybe you had to find a home for, you know, 6 or 7 people. And we were talking about hundreds of people that were displaced. And I think the city, together with all the different department heads, as well as my office, really worked to try and figure out how do we neutralize the situation, but make sure that there is some sense of community. We know, you know, we don't want to send them out and fend for themselves. You know, we're a community, so we provide for them. And so we worked on different tasks, such as, you know, like I said, how to find them housing, how to find them, more importantly, housing in Lawrence, how to make sure that, you know, the kids were still going to school, how to make sure that any kids in the affected area were getting, you know, the psychiatric treatment that they needed. How are they getting their food? And then, you know, when it came to the holidays, how could we give a little bit of joy, you know, for the Thanksgiving? We worked with other communities to try and bring their employees into our city, you know, because our employees were working overtime just so that we could work faster to inspect the homes that had been fixed so that they could get back into their homes faster, because winter was coming and without gas, nobody had heat. So there was kind of a little bit of everything that needed to be done. And like I said, I think that's when I really felt proud to, you know, work in a city like Lawrence, and be able to speak with the community. And I think that the administration have really pressed upon all the department heads, you know, to be part of the community, not just somebody out there in the wings with a title and everything like that. And that really kind of brought the city together.
Right. Well, you know, what I look for is someone who believes in second chances. And even as a bar advocate, I was so impressed what you did for that person who was drunk driving. And I have asked so many times, what do we do with alcoholics? You know, I mean, it just doesn't seem there is a way. I've gone to Judge Mashira's drug courts. They're wonderful, make me cry. These people testifying how this helped them, and it being at their graduation was such an honor. But you helped someone as a bar advocate. You had someone that was drunk driving, and you were able to get him into AA, get him in a program, and convince, well, I'm saying it, why don't you say who you convinced?
Sure. So when I was in Lynn, I had a client who was charged with an OUI fourth. And, you know, he was obviously held for a short time. I was eventually able to get him out on conditions of release, but those conditions of release were really stringent, and it was something that we made sure that he was able to still work. However, we were able to get him into programs. Like I said, he went to church daily, he went to AA daily. We found a program that he could go to once a week, and he had a partner that was very supportive. And I don't believe that, you know, a lot of people who are either alcohol or drug addicted don't really have a support system, but he did have a partner that was really there to help him every step of the way. And that was one of the cases where I really did immerse myself to try to make sure that he was successful throughout the pendency of the case. And I knew that just because of the charges, that there was really no way that we could have avoided jail time. But so we worked for a plan that, you know, no matter what jail time a judge would give him, that he would still have all the resources that we had set up when he was released. Because, you know, I didn't want to just say, oh, you know, this is our sentencing day, I'm done with you, you know, good luck in the world. I don't believe that that's how recovery works. You need constant
But he
support.
managed to keep his job.
He did.
Through all this.
Yes.
I mean, who would do that? That's why I was so impressed. In meeting with you, it's very important to me, part of my due diligence. And as busy as I am, and you are, that's so important because I get to know the whole person. I'm voting for the whole person, not just this. So that means a lot. Now, the other thing is I found that your empathy, that you've been there, you knew when your mother didn't have the means and you people struggled. And so I love what you said. You want to make a difference in the lives of the people and alternate solutions.
Yes.
How would you do that?
Like I said, I've not only been there, but as a practicing lawyer, I know that people are incarcerated or people aren't successful in their cases simply because of their lack of money. And that's not what cases should be about. It shouldn't be about in the haves and the haves not. It really should be about, the facts of the case and what the case merits. So having lived it firsthand and having represented clients that really needed that advocate, I do believe that it is a perspective that I can bring to the bench where I will be very aware and cognizant of requests made of me that are based primarily on money that don't really have anything to do with the facts of the case.
I'm trying to talk fast because I'm tired. I looked at what you've done in your community, in the school, that you have volunteered, you've been a speaker, you've done all these things with your busy life, with 3 children and working. That impresses me, because we don't see that. I don't see that in younger nominees, pro bono, or going out and helping people. And that's what impressed me about you. I love your writing. You can write. I love it. And this is the fear of all parents. You had the case that you wrote about where the boy was on, what did he do? He was on top of a wall or something and he fell. And that's our greatest fear because we don't know when our kids are out of our watch what happens. Tell us about that case.
Yeah, so in that case, we had an individual who sued the city of Lawrence because he was leaving school and was on a wall, and he got pushed off the wall, and unfortunately he had really bad head injuries where he needed to be med flighted. So it was a tough case, just dealing with children witnesses. I think is difficult for any litigator, but it was, and again, it was something that I have feelings for as a mother, and so while sympathetic, nevertheless, I still had to represent the city and the city's interests, and it was a tough case just for a myriad of reasons. But it's thankfully the boy is well, so it wasn't that a sad ending for him.
We've had some difficult cases. What I like is you have been defense attorney and you've been so you've had both, and you started out with civil and you've had criminal, but I think you have a good balance. I said to you, not crazy about the age, but I'll tell you, you have it all. And there are some people that have been attorneys for 30 years and don't have the experience you did. And, and to me, I know there's many people out there that you have changed their lives and helped them even in disasters or whatever. And it isn't because you know Spanish that I'm saying, hey, she should be a judge. It just adds to your ability to reach out to people. And especially in this area that you're going to be sent, we need someone that can speak the language and they can talk to and feel that they understand. So, I'm going to reach out. It's very pleased. So many things that you've done that I want to ask about your cases, but thank you for all the time. And on Patriots Day, and it was funny when you called and you said, "Will I get in the marathon, traffic?" I said, "No, not coming to Watertown. You won't." So just on the border. But thank you so much. Such a pleasure. And this is wonderful, having all these people. This is a democracy. This is a public hearing.
Thank you very much. Councilor Iannella?
Thank you very much, Madam Chairman. First of all, I want to make a comment. I just want to comment. I agree with Councilor Terry Kennedy. He indicated earlier today that he's opposed to counselors on webcam. I acknowledge that I have also used webcam. I have no intention moving forward to use webcam. I believe all the counselors should be present at the hearing and the assembly. So I commend Councilor Kennedy for bringing that up. Let me ask you a question. You're a judge. You have an operating on. You remember this defendant, because he's been before you numerous times. So you don't have the advantage of looking at the defendant's record because the trial's going on. You know this character, and he's not good. Okay? Now the prosecutor's operating, it's a horrific accent. Okay? The prosecutor forgets to prove one element of the crime, that it's a public way. Did a great job, but he forgot, or she forgot. So the defense attorney makes a motion for a required finding of not guilty. You know from those facts that this guy definitely was operating that. There's no doubt in your mind. And you know he's been he's a bad character. I said the defense attorney files the motion for directed required finding not guilty. And at that point, the prosecutor responds, I'd like to make a motion to reopen my case. What do you do in that situation?
I believe there's case law on this, but I wouldn't allow them to reopen their case. Once they have closed their case, I don't step in their role. I don't try to make sure that they have cured their deficiencies. They have closed their case, and once the motion's filed, I would rule accordingly.
3 weeks later, a month, this person again, and people got seriously injured. How are you feeling at that point? You had a chance. Put this guy in jail. How do you feel just as a human being?
As a human being, I know I'm going to get cases that I will make decisions that I don't agree with, but that's not my role. My role wouldn't be to insert my feelings on it. But I do know that in that situation, I probably wouldn't feel, I wouldn't feel great about it, but I would also know that I ruled accordingly, and I wasn't the prosecutor in that case, and there was nothing else that I could do about it. But I think as a human, I would have feelings about that.
Councilor Juvenile mentioned, there's judges who don't know how to say not guilty. When I first started out, I did hundreds and hundreds of criminal cases, court-appointed cases. A lot different then. It's different way how we got selected. In those days, the judge would pick attorney so-and-so, attorney so-and-so to handle the case different. There's no question. There were a lot of judges in my day when I do a criminal, could never say not guilty. I got the impression, and I could be wrong, you've been a lawyer now, it would take 20 years, do you know, I'm not going to ask you to name things, but do you know a fair amount of judges who don't know how to say not guilty? I mean, I get the impression that maybe you don't have that.
No, like I said, I know the reputations of some judges, and like I said, I've been a defense attorney where we have had those conversations where you say, what's going on with this? Do I set it up for a motion to suppress? Because you want to know you would like to know how this judge is going to rule, and you do base it on reputation. So yeah, no, I do know judges like that.
Strong believer in rehabilitation. They're positive as opposed to incarceration. I'm someone who likes to give someone a second chance, maybe a third chance. What's your view?
No, I agree. I actually think when I was speaking to Councilor Hurley, I think I described the district court as a court of second chances. They're humans coming before you. They're not infallible. They're going to make mistakes. And I do believe the district court has at its disposal a lot of resources that don't necessarily lead to incarceration. I think incarceration would be a last resort in a lot of situations, especially because you are going to be faced with people who come to you from different walks of life with different, whether it's mental health histories or substance abuse issues. And I believe that there's a lot of alternative dispositions that are available to a district court judge.
And have you been appointed to any specific court?
Yeah, I believe I've been appointed to Natick.
Natick?
Yes.
Well, I'm always a believer of the district court is the community court. Okay, you know, I live in Jamaica Plain. The court in my neighborhood is the West Roxbury District Court. You know, again, the community court, if somebody, you know, lives in the neighborhood, I don't, you know, my particular, but in that general area that the services, the work, they know what's going on. You live where?
In Georgetown.
Georgetown. And Georgetown is that close to me. I'm trying to be polite. I agree, and I know that just because you're appointed to this court means really nothing. You may never sit in anything. I like people to sit in the court, at least in the general area where they live. What's your philosophy on that?
No, I agree. I think you know kind of the people around there, you know, kind of, you know, what's the generalities of the area and kind of, I think you have a benefit when people, oh, you know, this happened at this intersection or at this school and you know exactly what you're talking about. I think if you come in kind of like an outsider and don't know anything, you're at a disadvantage.
Yeah, it's not worth even breaking entries. Right. Cars are being all the time, the state was just getting raised, so you have a little sense of that. What about continuances? Every single time I ask the question, and every single time I get the same answer. But in reality, when I go out there, the lawyers are coming up to me, can you believe it? I went for a joint motion, I sent it to for continuance, and the judge said, no, it's been on the docket too long. Okay, so here it is. I know your answer, but what's going to happen once you get confirmed? Continuances. Now, okay, what's your philosophy on continuances?
In the almost 18 years that I've practiced, I don't believe I've ever said I'm going to oppose a continuance to any opposing. Things come up. I think we all wear many hats. We're not just lawyers. We're husbands, we're fathers, we're sisters, we're brothers, we're aunts. You know, things come up. So I have never opposed a motion for a continuance. So I believe that my philosophy will still continue should I be appointed. I know that things come up and it doesn't make sense to, I think, prejudice a client, whether it's the prosecutor or the defense, if you're not, you know, an attorney's not ready to go, to force them to do something that will only prejudice their case. I don't believe that that's what we're meant to do on the bench.
I'm talking about a criminal case where the defense has been in custody. That's a different issue. Now you go to the native district court. They assign you, Dolly assigns you to the native district court. You spend the day there, and you're going there tomorrow. And the first case comes before you, and been on 3 times, 4 times, and there's an order from the prior judge, no further continuances. Okay? The civil case. What are you going to do? It's been on 4 times, and the prior judge says no further continuances. You don't usually see those orders, but you see them once in a while.
I've heard, yeah. No, I still think if the parties are reforming and they have a good reason.
I'm sorry. That's my fault. Only one party is asking. It's a little easy now when both parties are asking. One party is asking for the continuance.
I still believe I would offer it. I mean, when I have asked for continuance, it has been for good reason. And I believe that if this attorney is coming before me and asking one, they have a good reason as well. I don't believe I can put my judgment over theirs, and I would more than likely grant it.
Okay, and Councilor Juvenile knows who I'm talking about, but I won't mention it. Some judges, you know, you file a motion, or even a joint motion for continuance, say the trial is May 3rd. And I'll say, okay, come in and argue the motion April 27th. Are you gonna make it the lawyers and they charge and they're gonna be on the places come in to argue the motion, or are you just gonna allow the motion? As you said, you basically would allow the motion to continue the case. You're gonna force the attorneys to come in prior to the scheduled date of the trial. You follow my question?
I do, but I've had it happen to me and where I had to come in to argue it, but I think personally, I don't know why I would need them to come in, if the motions, they're officers of the court, and if they state their reason for the motion, I presume that that's.
Because Junior, one of the top criminal lawyers in the state, if he has to come in to argue that motion, guess what? He's gonna have to charge the client. And he's a high-priced attorney. So he's gonna have to come in. And so, not many judges do that, very, very few. But I want to get an assurance from you that you're not gonna force lawyers to come in to argue a motion for continuance.
Like I said, if the facts are stated there, it's an officer of the court representing that they have a good reason why they need it. Like I said, even in my practice, I've never not given a continuance, so I believe that that's how I would continue.
My last question, last statement, I'm gonna tell you the answer first. Chief Justice Dollar was here, he comes in a lot. I asked him, I said, what is that an issue with COVID? And, there's a trial schedule. And he says, Judge, I don't feel comfortable coming in. It's been on a while. I'm granted the new search now. We're a lot better off today than we were before. And he said, and I said, what's going to happen? Are you going to tell your judges there that they should grant continuances under those circumstances? And he said, 100% yes. So I assume you agree with all.
No, I do. I know a lot of people that have health concerns and.
And the other thing too, when I talked to Dolly, a lot of people don't want to do a trial. We're talking arguing motion. They don't want to do a trial on Zoom. Look at the jury. You want to look at it. You agree with that?
I would. I would prefer.
Thank you very much. I think you're going to be an outstanding jurist. You have a great educational background. Nice witnesses here with the mayor. I look forward to voting for you next week.
Thank you so much.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome, Counselor. So I'm not going to rehash everything we've already talked about. I think that's a waste of time. I'm in Lawrence a lot. In fact, I was there yesterday, and every time I'm there, since you were nominated, somebody stops me, either in the court or in El Tipico or one of the other wonderful myriad restaurants or even in City Hall, to tell me how valuable you've been to the community, and I deeply appreciate that. I think I shared with you many years ago, I was in Guatemala for a few weeks. And ironically, I happened to be there during Holy Week on Monday, Thursday, and in the capital. And the art I witnessed then became part of my doctoral dissertation project that I did. Years later, unbeknownst to me, this would ever be, I just happened to stumble upon a fantastic part of your heritage that really stayed with me very, very deeply. It's a beautiful, complicated country. Coming from a country like that, I think you bring a knowledge that a lot of people don't have in your heritage and your family, and the heroicness of them to come to this country as immigrants. I tell people, until you've been in the country and you don't speak the language, it's a real way of learning humility. And I guess I'm grateful that I've had that experience. I've been able to travel all over the world, and I've had that experience many times, and it's formed me. And I think it's formed you and your family as well. And I think you bring that with you as an attorney. And it is, as I say, the intangible thing, that can't be quantified on a resume. So I was delighted. I'd heard about you for many years, but I was delighted to hear that you had been nominated. And I think you know, the council probably concurs that you may be going to the bench. So we don't know. Anything can happen. But with that said, this hearing is ended. Thank you.
Question, are we starting the next hearing? Or is there a recess? Can anybody hear me?
Yes, Mary, 11:30.
Okay, thank you. Are we starting the meeting? Hello?
We're starting the meeting.
Before we start, I just want to indicate that we are on live stream, I guess they call it, which has been down for about 3.5, 4 weeks, but through the work of all the counselors and the staff at the Governor's Council Office, in coordination with the Lieutenant Governor and Governor and their staff, we've been able to put all the pieces together and get it back and up and running. So that's what's new for today. So you'll be the second candidate on the new live stream up, okay? Let me read a letter to the, put in the record, the letter from the governor. April 6, 2022, Executive Council, Chamber, State House, Boston, Mass. Dear Councilors, I'm pleased to nominate John P. Pappas to the position of Associate Justice of the Superior Court. I submit this nomination for the advice and consent of the Executive Council pursuant to Part 2, Chapter 2 of the Constitution of the Commonwealth of Massachusetts. I'm enclosing the nominee's resume for your convenience. Sincerely, Charles D. Baker, Governor. The vice is the Honorable Robert N. Tuchka. With that, I will ask the nominee if you want to introduce the people that are here.
Thank you, Councilor Jubenville. I'm humbled to be here today. I have a number of people. I have 2 witnesses who will be testifying on my behalf today, Amanda Gibbs and the Honorable James Boudreau. I'd like to introduce my family, my wife, Catherine, my daughter, Olivia, my son, Nicholas, on the other side of the room, my oldest sister, Pam, and then just going around the room, good friend and former boss, 14th District Attorney of Suffolk County, Dan Conley, close colleague and old neighborhood friend of mine from when we were little kids, Rob Satana, colleague of mine, Mark Lee, dear friend, first person I ever met in the District Attorney's Office at the Boston Municipal Court, Peter Flaherty, who's a dear friend of mine, Jim Boudreau, who I introduced, a mentor and close friend of mine for many, many years, now an Associate Justice at the Boston Municipal Court, Jim Coffey, the District Attorney now, 16th District Attorney of Suffolk County, Kevin Hayden, close best friend of mine, Chris Sargent, very, very close colleague of mine over the years, spanning 3 decades, and now the Chief of Homicide, Ed Zabin, another close colleague of mine, and probably the secret of some of my biggest successes in the courtroom. He did all my graphics over the years, John Green, Amanda Gibbs' husband, Michael Gibbs. I think that's it. Thank you very much, Counselor.
Okay. So we'll start by having your first witness, Judge Boudreau.
Where would you like me to sit?
Right over there, Judge. Didn't think we'd have you back so soon.
It has only been a few months. It's good to see you. So, good morning, members of the council on Zoom as well as presently here. As you know, I'm here to recommend John Pappas to the Superior Court, and I do so without reservation and without hesitation. You know, I've had the good fortune to work with John throughout the years as a colleague, and in that capacity, I've observed his work both as an assistant district attorney, a lawyer, and I've also developed a friendship with John. So I talked about John for a moment as a prosecutor from
a defense attorney's perspective, which is what the role I had for many years. I knew John and tried cases with John for approximately 20 years. And I have to tell you that he was a stellar prosecutor, a person who was fair and respectful to everyone that he dealt with, both from the defense side as well as from his own side when he was with the victims. Coming across, as you all know who work in an office, in Boston, you come across a whole different array of people, socioeconomic backgrounds, racial backgrounds, and John had nothing but the greatest respect for all the people he dealt with, and I watched that firsthand. In terms of his preparation, I know that his graphic person is here. I'm finally able to meet him personally, and I know that John has benefited from that because the work that John did in the courtroom was nothing less than the best. I was up against him on 2 serious homicide trials and have had other cases with him. And he is, I have to say, and I apologize to his fellow prosecutors who are here, he outshone everyone when he was inside the courtroom. And he was always prepared, articulate, and again, respectful. As the prosecutor, I always found him to have the highest level of ethics. And I say that personally because when we're dealing with those difficult cases, the homicide cases, it's incredibly important to be transparent, not only so the case doesn't come back and haunt you later on, but also because you want to make sure that you're doing the work at the highest level. And John always did that. Never had any concerns. He was always transparent with me, always had an open file before that became a kind of a necessity. And John always was somebody who brought to me any concerns he had about witnesses in advance. No issues regarding his ethical abilities in that area. John is extremely intelligent and prepared, but intelligent. And not only that, flexible. You see him in the courtroom pivot. You see him be able to make arguments under fire. And in addition to that, was somebody whose demeanor was always balanced. And as you know, when we're in the pitched battle, there's an opportunity to get out of control, to lose one's temperament. Never happened with John in the cases I was with him. And I say that personally, but I also speak to my colleagues in the defense field who all said the same thing about him. There was never a complaint about John in any respect. In fact, he had the highest respect from all my colleagues. And ultimately, beyond being well-balanced and a good temperament, John had good decision-making skills, again, in the pitched battle, but also with trying to resolve cases and working with the judges and making arguments, never overplaying his hand, but also understanding that it was necessary for both for purposes of justice and for resolution of cases. And I think all those qualities are critical for a judge in the Superior Court, but not all people have them. It's part of John's DNA. And I think he's an excellent candidate for the bench. And I'm not friends with every assistant district attorney. I have a number of people that I've become friends with, but I am with John partially because of mutual respect for each other, but also he's a good person. He's a person who I've always thought makes good decisions, but also does the right thing. In the end, does the right thing. And frankly, has a pretty good sense of humor. I've always enjoyed that about John. And again, these are innate qualities that can't be taught. And he has trust. He has a trust of his colleagues being placed in the positions that he's had. And he has, I think, the trust of the bar. And ultimately, he's a fair and reasonable person. And although John has not been a civil practitioner, he does have the flexibility and intellect to make that transition. He is a trial lawyer by nature. He's, as I said before, intellectually flexible, understands the rule of evidence like a law professor, and is efficient and well-reasoned both as a researcher and as a writer, which I've seen both. So I have no doubt that John will adapt quickly to the civil work that faces him. In my opinion, that's not a barrier at all. I'm aware that the governor has nominated a number of prosecutors for this position in recent years, but John is different for the reasons I've spoken about already. He's a stellar nomination. I think that will make every counselor proud if you confirm it. So thank you.
Thank you very much for your words. Yeah, Councilor Devane.
It's been a long time.
It has been.
No, when was it? How many years ago?
Well, no, it's not that long. October. It feels like it during
And
the,
you haven't come to visit us since then.
it's good to see you. though.
But no, it's such an honor to have you be a witness for the nominee. How long have you known the nominee?
Mr. Pappas, for at least 20 years, if not
Oh,
longer.
no. You know, that means a lot to me because I've been here 22 years, as you know, and I've had people that have come as a witness and I've said, you know, how long have you known this nominee? Oh, I saw him once in court. That doesn't, what you said was from your heart and you know, and I think, you know, you saw the person that he is too, with his family and all. Do you want to talk about any of that?
Well, I mean, in terms of my friendship from John, you know, we're not, I'm not the type of person that necessarily
Yeah.
has,
But you know, he's
trips
committed.
outside of the court, but I do know, we talk about his family. I know how committed and loyal he is to his family, and what a good family man he is.
Right, right. Well, it's so good to see you and you're doing good things and you couldn't have been nominated at a most difficult time through the pandemic. So thank you for all your service.
Yeah,
Mr. Chair, if I may,
Mr. Kennedy.
Judge, it's good to see you again. Judge, I just want to say something about a comment that you made about the governor getting a lot of criticism for putting too many prosecutors on. I agree with you that he has gotten a lot of criticism for putting too many prosecutors on, but I disagree with the premise. I think if people look at the numbers, they'll find that it's pretty well balanced between prosecutors and defense lawyers. It's something that we as a council have pushed back on, and I think that we've gotten some results from that. I think there have been a pretty fair number of people from the defense bar. I also think part of it is the problem is that, you know, people who've been prosecutors and then defense lawyers are labeled as prosecutors forever. We had a nominee this morning who was a prosecutor for a time in Suffolk County and then went into defense work. I wouldn't label her as a prosecutor. So I disagree with that. I don't think that it's a situation where there's been too many prosecutors. I think it's been pretty well balanced.
And I don't disagree with that. I'm a defense lawyer by trade, and I was nominated and confirmed by this. That wasn't my suggestion at all. I wanted to make sure that everybody realized that John was a standout as a prosecutor.
No, I agree with that, but I just wanted to correct the record there. I think there have been a lot of members from the defense bar that have been nominated under the Baker administration. That's all.
Thank you, Counselor Ino.
Thank you, Judge.
No questions, you're doing a great job, and glad to see you again.
Judge, can I just ask you a question?
Sure, I'm sorry. I didn't need to.
How many years did you practice criminal law?
I practice approximately 30.
So, to me, your testimony is really important because you have done so much trial work and you get to know DAs over the years, and I'm sure you wouldn't be here if you had any doubts about this nominee.
Absolutely not, without reservation or hesitation.
And how have you made the transition from lawyer to judge?
I think, from my opinion, well, whether or not the bar thinks that, but I think it's been a natural transition for me, as I think it will be for John. I think the support of the colleagues and the program they have is excellent. So I think Mr. Pappas would do well.
Where are you sitting?
Woburn right now.
Good for you. Thank you very much for coming.
Anything else?
Amanda Gibbs.
Good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
Thank you for having me here. I'm just going to read something I have sent. I have known John Pappas for about 5 years. We met as a result of the murder in Boston of my goddaughter, Dr. Lina Bolaños, and her fiancé, Dr. Richard Field, on May 5th, 2017. John Pappas was the Suffolk County District Attorney who tried the criminal murder case against Texera. There are two sides of my discussion about John Pappas. The first side is his knowledge of law and professionalism. During the course of the year prior to trial, I, my husband, and our family and the family of Dr. Field attended numerous date updates, meetings with John Pappas. John clearly explained legal issues of the case and always took time to listen and answer our questions. John's attention to every detail of the case, I believe, left no stone unturned, finding all facts related to this case. He worked closely with Boston detectives who gathered various pieces of evidence. John always invited the lead Boston detective to his meetings, and we were able to ask questions of him. John said to me that attention to detail is very important in a period of conviction is ever heard, and the importance to rule out any missteps or oversight of the prosecution process. I attended all days of the trial. During the trial, I observed John's complete knowledge of facts and his methodical attention to detail of presentation. He is truly a master of his job. The resulting jury verdict was guilty of first-degree murder with sentencing of life imprisonment with no parole possibility. Now, there is the second side of John Pappas I want you to know. These murders were devastating to our families. What makes John so special to me and our families is his outward compassion, empathy, and understanding that this was not just an exercise in creating a conviction, but acknowledging how it deeply affected our lives. John was sensitive to our grieving and the brutality of the murders, and he sincerely wanted justice done for us. I believe that John Pappas would be an extraordinary addition to the Massachusetts Court as a Superior Court judge. I believe he is dedicated to always doing what is right and just. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councilor Devaney.
I'm sorry, I didn't hear the name of the victim. You tell me?
So this happened May 5th, 2017. My goddaughter, Dr. Lina Bolaños, and her fiancé, Dr. Richard Field, they were murdered in a penthouse in South Boston. So
They're doctors.
yes.
Yes. I will never forget that case. I'm so sorry. To have someone that's compassionate that you could go to, and you did say that he called you and kept in touch with you.
He made the transition of this grieving to be, it's not going to go away, but he made it so that we felt he was really there, as if he was part of the family of.
I mean, you never get over that grief, but thank God for the justice that he deserved.
We couldn't have any better person. The family sends their regards.
Thank you so much. Your testimony meant so much, really.
Thank you. It was my pleasure to be here. Anything else?
Thank you very much. Well done. We're going to have Dan Conley say a few words.
Thank you, Councilor Gilbertville, and councilors that are present, councilors that are here on video link. Yeah, it's really my great fortune and privilege to have a friend like John Pappas, so really happy to be able to say a few words I sent over. And not to belabor the point, but, you know, for the better, I met John actually when he was a law student and I was a young DA. But we really got to know each other during my nearly 17 years as the Suffolk District Attorney. During that time, John was one of my closest confidants, advisors in that very important role. And over time, We developed a close professional and personal relationship. So, Councilor Devane, I mean, it's been said by Judge Boudreau and many others, John's legal abilities are unquestioned. I mean, incredibly talented litigator, knowledgeable, knows the rules of evidence inside and out. So that piece of it has been said and said very well by others and clearly. But I'll just talk briefly about John the man. You know, over those nearly 17 years when we became close friends, you know, we had many conversations both about our work, the role of the prosecutor in this criminal justice system, and conversations about our kids. My kid's a little bit older than John's, going through the period of growth as children and then adolescents and athletes and whatever you have it. John, you know, somehow was able to build and develop an incredible professional career. At the same time, an incredible husband and father to Kathy and the two kids. They've been over my house many times, and I've got to know them well. He loves them with an unquestioned a depth and unconditionally, and they know that. They see him. As a leader in our office, you know, John is not using a sports analogy because he's an athlete. Using a sports analogy, not the kind of guy in the locker room that's going to jump up on the bandbox and start screaming and cajoling the other players to play well. John simply carried himself in a way that everybody wanted to emulate him. You know, he was just the consummate professional leader in our office. When I was district attorney, I asked all of the leaders, Ed Zabin, Mark Lee, Josh Wall, Pat Hagan, Dave Deacon, who are now all judges. Yeah, not Mark yet, but hopefully one day. To be trial lawyers too. It's very easy when you rise to the level that they rose to kind of put the trial work aside, but I never wanted that. That's why on the Texera matter, we assigned John to the case, the most complex, the most difficult, the most challenging work, as with the other gentleman that I just mentioned, and others in the office that are here. And so he had the overall supervision of all the trial work in the office, plus his own caseload. And, you know, to say that I couldn't have done it without him and some of the others in this room is really an understatement. I'm just privileged to have his friendship and to see him rise to this level. There is a few lawyers more deserving for this honor, and I know that John will do a tremendous job. What's most important to me in a judge, frankly, is the way they treat people. And I think there's no question John is going to treat every person, litigant, defense attorney, prosecutor, civil litigator, witness, with the highest level of respect and fairness and good temperament. And to me, that's very important. So I appreciate the opportunity to say a few words on John's behalf. And if you have any questions, I'm happy to take them.
Thank you. Go ahead, Councilor.
I'm proud to say you're my friend. We served on a board, and I was very proud to be a member of the Commission for Social Justice of the Sons of Italy of America, which was established over 35 years ago to stop stereotyping of Italians and recognizing outstanding Italian Americans in Massachusetts. So I wanted to say that because you wouldn't say it. But no,
I didn't know I was Italian until you.
No, you're like my kids, you know. But I just wanted to say that your letter, it was so heartfelt that you really know this person personally and professionally. And what you said about him, how his knowledge of evidence, unwavering ethical compass, and shown again to know the complex issues and all of that. And what I loved what you said was that John is there for those who struggle, toil, and labor in life's margins. And the combination of allowing him to investigate and prosecute some losses. When I met with him, I knew those cases, they were, you know, they were profiled And I couldn't believe that he had all of that, background, and we need that. We need his life experience to bring to the judge. When you think of all of the cases that you had when he was working for you, is there one that stands out that he was remarkable in that case?
Well, one of the things we always talked about when I was district attorney, and I'm sure District Attorney Hayden emphasizes the same thing, our job is about serving victims and then holding criminals accountable for their actions. And one thing that John was really well known for, and as previous witness testified to, is just, the ability to fully identify with victims of violence and their families. Sympathy is when you feel an emotion for someone else. Empathy is when you can actually stand in their shoes and feel it. And John was like that. And we both can cry at the drop of a hat, so I don't want to do that. But when his father was hit by, out on Center Street in West Roxbury, I think in some ways it changed John. Even he was an empathetic guy already, but having, lived through the violence that his father had to deal with. And, it just really changes a person. And so no one case sticks out, but I think as the previous witness said, he understands and lived that experience so well that he could identify with it, and he treated everybody the same, any victim, any family. So proud of him for that.
But I want to thank you for your service. They couldn't replace you, and we missed you when you left.
You're doing a good job.
No offense, no offense. Yeah, I haven't had the opportunity to meet you yet, but I just, you served with empathy, with compassion, and knowledge, and we'll never forget the service that you gave. So thank you, and your testimony means an awful lot. Really.
Thank you,
does.
counsel.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Dan. Suffolk County District Attorney Kevin Hayden.
I'm so sorry. Oh,
No offense taken, I'm just getting started.
but you were not the immediate. Okay, so I
No.
didn't mean you.
No offense taken whatsoever, thank you.
Wasn't you?
And thank you for the opportunity to come up briefly and speak on John's behalf. I wasn't prepared for this, but I'm really honored and humbled to do so. So, when I was in the DA's office, I was there from 1997 to 2008. John was always there. John was always there when I was there. And he was always ahead of me. And I always watched him, admired, and esteemed how he did his job each and every day. D.A. Connolly referred to him as a leader in the office, and he has always been a leader in the office. He's always stood out amongst prosecutors as stellar, attentive, compassionate, brilliant trial lawyer. He did it all, and I always admired and respected him for that. And, he's still there. He never left. I left, I came back, he was still there. And that's a testimony to his dedication as a public servant. I will say this, and I didn't know John as well then as I do now. But even back then, what stood out to me about John was I knew it was obvious. It sort of poured from his veins, and to an extent. He is a family man, and that was always obvious. His love for his family and for his wife and his children was always obvious. And that love for his family extended into the office. It extended into the community. It extended into the cases that he handled. And it's that compassion and love that he had for his family that just exuded in pretty much everything that he did, in every case that he tried. Very even-keeled is a very good way to describe John. I don't think I've ever heard him raise his voice, not ever. I'm sure he probably has, but I haven't seen it. He's always been a temperament, both in and out of court,
always impeccable, extraordinary, and above reproach. But I guess I could say two other things about John. One is that since I have come back to the office, his leadership, his friendship, his fellowship to me has been immeasurable. I have relied upon John in many, many ways in a very short period of time since I've come back to the district attorney's office as a DA. And I don't know if I would be as even keeled as I am if it weren't for having him by my side. I talk with him regularly. I meet with him regularly. His wisdom, his advice, his support of me has been implacable, and just means so very much to me. And so a friendship that was existed before has become all the stronger in a very, very short period of time. And I just want, John, you to know how very much I appreciate you. And I guess the last thing I would say, and this is, I think, the best way that I can describe John, and I say, I don't, when I say this, I don't say it lightly, and it's not a term I use often, but I would certainly use it to describe John. He is, simply put, a man of honor. And as a man of honor, I know he will make a good and honorable judge. Thank you.
Well, we can have him go back to Suffolk County if he comes.
No, I'm not. I'd never hold any. Believe me, I'd love to have him back, but I'm not going to hold anyone back. He's going to make a great judge.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Judge deserves him. He really does.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
I just have one question. Can you think of one adjective to describe this nominee, what he'll bring to the bench?
Yeah, I think it's the one. Well, I'll use two because I already used one. He truly is a man of honor, and I don't say that about many people. But he's compassionate. The former DA, my boss, used the word empathy.
And I often said here that I would never vote for anyone who doesn't have compassion.
Yeah, well,
And he certainly has shown it through the years.
he's got it in spades, and it shows up in each and every case. It shows up in the way he treats each and every person in the courtroom, whether it's the defendant or the victim or the witnesses. Everyone is a human being worthy of honor and respect in his eyes, and it shows in everything that he does.
Well, thank you for your service.
Well, thank you. Yeah, likewise. Thank you so much.
Thank you. That takes care of the witnesses on your behalf. Anybody here in opposition? Anybody here in opposition? Hearing nothing, we'll hear from you.
Thank you, Councilor Jubenville. Just, I'm a lucky guy. I'm a really lucky guy. And I'm going to try and keep my comments brief, but it's and I will.
We love the rule of brevity up here.
It was a struggle to try and compress 28 years plus into the comments that I'm about to give. First, of course, I have some people to thank. I want to thank Governor Baker and Lieutenant Governor Polito, not just for showing the confidence in their nomination of me as an Associate Justice of the Superior Court, but before that, back in 2018, when Governor Baker appointed me District Attorney to fill out the remainder of Dan Conley's term. And then in 2022, for further considering me for the appointment, which ultimately went to my good friend, Kevin Hayden. I want to thank the Governor's Council, and especially you, Councilor Jubenville, as my host counselor and my district counselor, for being so generous with your time and so accommodating to help guide me through this process. And I want to thank the other counselors that I've had the opportunity to meet with in person or over the phone, or to set up time after today's hearing to the extent they feel it's necessary to speak with me about my nomination. It's kind of an unusual position that I've been in. I've told a number of people that I was more nervous coming into today's hearing than I've been in giving any opening or trial in some of the biggest cases I've had over the last 10, 20 years. And one of the reasons for that is because those are all known factors and things that I can control. And this is an unknown for me going through this process. I want to thank the Judicial Nominating Commission and their staff, the Joint Bar Commission, Governor's Legal Counsel, Bob Ross, my good friend Lauren Green Petrino, who's been a friend of mine for years and has been so helpful throughout this process, along with her staff. You know, there are so many people that I've had contact with over the years, and I've been so lucky over the years, 28 plus years. My best description of my job is that it's never seemed like a job to me. The trial court staff that I've met, clerks, court officers, court reporters, you know, the staff that would be coming through, the grand jury offices on the 6th floor when I'd be there at 10 o'clock at night on trial that I developed relationships with over the years. Just too many to mention. Members of the judiciary, former colleagues of mine who've now become judges, defense attorneys who become judges, all who reached out to me after my nomination and stayed in touch with me and were so supportive during the process. Probation officers, and of course, law enforcement from the Boston Police Department, Massachusetts State Police, Transit Police, Chelsea, Revere, and Winthrop, all of them. And last but not least, all my colleagues in the Suffolk County District Attorney's Office. My extended family, you know, assistant district attorneys, good friends, Ed Zabin, Mark Lee, you know, so many, just they're here today, but so many of them over the years that we've gone to battle that I could rely on for different issues. You know, help me with this. I've never seen this before. How do you think this will play out in court? You know, am I doing this the right way? You know, without their support, I would not be sitting here today, frankly. The victim witness advocates, support staff, investigators, technical and trial support. When it comes to doing some of the cases that I've done over the years, I'm not the reason for the success alone. All success is shared, and they were truly team efforts. And I always analogized at Councilor Jubenville to when one of these cases happened, from the point of incident, it would be like assembling and running a small business from the point of incident to verdict. And all the personalities that you had to manage, all the people you had to meet, what their roles were, what their jobs were going to be during the trial, how you managed evidence. It was truly like running a small business, and we always took a team approach to it. And I was fortunate that I had great teams to work with. Yeah, I was the guy in the courtroom presenting the case, but that's not possible unless you have all the people putting in the sweat equity behind the scenes, putting in late hours, coming in on weekends, dealing with my impossible standards until we had it just right so that the jury would see exactly what we wanted them to see in a courtroom. Again, all success is shared, and you know, everyone was valued. How lucky have I been to work for the district attorneys that I did over the years? Ralph Martin, who I'm still friendly with, gave me my shot when he appointed me on September 12th, 1994, and I remain friends with him to this day. Dan Conley, who inherited me as one of Ralph's staffers, and I had been in the office about 9 years at that point, and not only kept me on, but just elevated my career and took an interest in my career, and was a major reason for the success I experienced over the next 20 years in the office. Rachel Rollins, who kept me on when she assumed office, allowing me to serve and to complete the prosecution of Pullman Texiera. And Kevin Hayden, who's here today. And, you know, my career, counselor, is simply a byproduct of the people that I've been fortunate to work with over the last 28 plus years. I've had great teachers and mentors every step of the way who taught me so much about what it is not only to be a good trial attorney, but how to do the job the right way, how to treat people fairly, how to handle evidence, how to never hide the ball on anything, and to be transparent. I've had so many great, you know, mentors, great friends. I mentioned Pete Flaherty, first guy I met in the Suffolk DA's office at the old BMC in the bullpen, where we had I think 14 or 15, 16 prosecutors in that room. And school was in session, everyone left the room at the same time and went up to the sessions and then would come back down. And what an unbelievable group we had. From 1994 to this day, one of my closest friends, and without him, I would not be here today. Justice Jim Coffey, another great mentor for me, who taught me in preparation for a trial. If you want to do major cases, it's all in the preparation. And an expression that he's had in that I've always abided by and I've always applied to the work that I do. John, it's 80% preparation and the last 20% is execution in the courtroom. I've lived by it. You know, Kevin Mullen, I don't think is here today, the first assistant, and of course, Ed Zabin and Mark Lee, that we've had, you know, many cases with over the years. Some people that couldn't be here today, you know, Bob Tochka, David Meyer, and Pat Hagan. I'd be remiss if I didn't mention their names today, Councilor Jubenville. You know, having Kevin, you know, I didn't have him originally on my witness list, Councilor Jubenville. I'm so happy that you had him come forward and be heard. I feel like I've come full circle in the office with DA Hayden now, who I've known for years. I feel that the office is in good hands with him. Kevin Mullen is the first assistant, and I know if given the chance, he'll take the office to newer and better heights. I've introduced my family. My wife, Catherine, who many of you might not know, is a very successful attorney and has her own practice. She's a shareholder. They have offices in Wellesley and Rhode Island. She was a partner at a firm before going off on her own and setting up her own firm in the civil litigation insurance defense section. Her support for me has been unwavering over the years. Every trial I did, I mean, there wasn't a thought, an opening that I thought of or a closing that I thought of that she didn't hear first. The way she was able to hold down the fort with our kids when they were younger, when I was on trial, and I would get that look in my eyes, and she just said, just go, you know, we'll see you when you're done. And, you know, whether those were, you know, 12, 14, 16-hour days, 7 days a week until we brought the case where it needed to be to verdict, she was always there and so supportive, not just throughout my career, but throughout this whole application process to the bench. I would not be the lawyer I am, and I would not be the person I am without her. My two kids, Olivia, you know, graduate of Boston Latin School. She's going to be graduating from Boston University next year with next month with her degree in education. And she aspires to be a teacher, hopefully in the Boston Public Schools. And my son, Nick, another Boston Latin School alum, he did a postgraduate year at the Winchendon School, and now he's attending Bentley University. He's a freshman there. My sister Pam is here today, my oldest sister, who, you know, through some really difficult times in our family was really the quarterback and the backbone, you know, setting up long-term care plans and, you know, keeping everyone involved and our spirits high during those really tough times that we couldn't have done without her. My brother Pete, my younger brother Pete is here, you know, who, you know, the best brother a guy could ever ask for. Always has taken an interest in my work, always supportive, always, you know, when our parents were sick, was right there, no matter how busy he was trying to run his own business, always right there, forever. And the people who couldn't be here, my mom and dad, I would like to see their reaction. They probably wouldn't believe it that I'm sitting in this chair today, because sometimes I'm sitting here and I can't believe it. My mother's sister, my Aunt Helen, my mother-in-law, grandparents, aunts, uncles, and cousins, and in-laws. So many friends and colleagues. I wouldn't be here today without their friendship, guidance, and support. I'm a lucky and blessed man. You have my packet, counselors, my application packet. outlining all my qualifications. I'm not going to certainly go through that, ad nauseum. A little bit about how I arrived here today, really was quite a journey. I had parents and grandparents who came from small villages in Greece, making their way ultimately to West Roxbury from Canada, Utah, Roxbury, Rosendale, and ultimately in West Roxbury. My mom and dad, Nick and Rose, raised 4 kids in West Roxbury. My sister Pam, my sister Valerie, myself, and my brother Peter. Where we have always been very close, and I think we've gotten closer as we've gotten older. My dad started his own appliance business in the Roxbury section of the city of Boston that was ultimately taken over by my brother Pete, who runs it to this day. And my mom was a homemaker, always there for us raising 4 kids, and always putting us in position where we were never afraid to try something, never afraid to fail. I myself am a product of the Boston Public Schools, having gone to the Randall G. Morris, Solomon Lewinburg, and Mattapan during busing, graduating from Boston Latin School in 1982 and UMass Amherst in 1986. From there, I started off on my work history, working for the Suffolk County Sheriff's Department, a small law office on School Street in the old City Hall building, where I met Peter Flaherty's dad, Francis X. Flaherty, years before I met Peter. And then clerking full-time at Parker Coulter Daly and White at 1 Beacon Street while I attended New England School of Law Knights, graduating in 1993. I was admitted to the Mass Bar that year with aspirations to join the Suffolk County District Attorney's Office, which I ultimately did in 1994, and then forged my career, for the next 28 plus years through that office. I'm proud to have served under multiple administrations and proud of the body of work that I've built over nearly 3 decades. The work and the cases that I've done have not only made me a better lawyer, but more importantly, made me a better person. A couple of things that have always stood out. We encounter people, especially as we get into the more serious victim cases, and in my cases, homicides, people who find themselves literally staring into the abyss, and yet they have the ability to conduct themselves with such dignity and grace. The strength they have, to me, that I've seen case after case has just been so unbelievable. And it's never lost on me that our greatest successes as trial attorneys almost always come on the heels of someone's greatest tragedy. I'm incredibly humbled to be here today. If confirmed, I'll bring to the bench the same principles that have guided me in my career as an assistant district attorney. I thank you all for your time and careful consideration of my nomination, and I look forward to answering any questions. Thank you very much.
Thank you. The counselor's job is to do their due diligence in any way they feel they need to do. Some meet with people, some do call people in that you put in your applications and so forth. So most counselors are pretty well advised about you before the hearing begins. So about a month ago, we had a vote to change the process a little bit to give every counselor 15 minutes to ask their questions because they've done their due diligence, most of them already. So we're going to start the process doing that. Councilor Devaney.
Thank you. First of all, I want to thank you for allowing 20 people. This is great. Last week when you presided, Judge D'Angelo was told no one comes. So I'm glad we're back to a democracy.
That was my decision.
Okay. I just want to say that thank you for coming. It was a busy weekend. Patriots Day weekend and you came. And I have to tell you, it was so great. I mean, first of all, there was more Greek people in that time that came over to you. It was really, you were a hero. So, and I want to wish everybody a happy Easter next Sunday. So thank you for all your time. I don't have a poker face and the example of in the court. And I have seen you vote here, and I have voted no, not all the time, but I vote no on someone that's not qualified. And that you are the role model for what we need. And we have some good people that come squeeze through sometimes. But anyway, I want to tell you, Counselor Ianella Counselor Ianella graduated from the same prestigious high school in Boston that you did. And I have to say, I always thought, wow, you have to be pretty smart to graduate from that school. So anyway, having said that, I mean, talking with you, I mean, I cry half the time meeting with you. I don't know how, and you can't even count how many cases you've had, how many trials, but I thank you. And you have really made a mark, even a legacy against drunk driving and what you did. And I want to say these things, and we're timed, which I voted against. I don't think you should be timed. I think everyone should hear everything you have to say. But it was 7-1, so on the tuxedo with brown shoes. So, having said that, I'm going to say these things, and then I want you to reply till they sound the bell. Okay, first of all, the drunk driving, you know what I mean, that one. Okay, the other one is about Jermaine Rucker. In the JNC, I didn't hear the result. And when I met with you, I didn't ask. Sean Waters broke my heart. His fiance said, I will always be his fiance, his wife. Okay? We talked about Dr. Field and Dr. Balanis, and we got a letter. His brother, heartfelt. I mean, these tragedies, so egregious. The state trooper that was involved with Santos LaBoy, that was humility, and so the other thing is that Amy Lord, oh my gosh, I want, you have done an article, a writing, so I want you to tell us about that Rufo versus inmates of Suffolk County Jail. I think that's very important. So we don't have much time. We have to talk fast because we're on a timer. So if you can remember the things I'm asking you, I would love you to respond.
I'm going to try. So reverse order. It was, you know, the article that I wrote that was published in the Journal of Criminal and Civil and Criminal Confinement at New England School of Law. My first year out of college, I actually worked at the Sheriff's Department, which you know, a few years later gave me the inspiration to write that article that wound up being published. Go figure. That was just a unique opportunity, and I was lucky to work there because you know, it kind of, you know, fueled the fire and inspired me and led me to the decision. If I go to law school, I think I want to work in the district attorney's office. That, you know, I was able to realize that a few years down the road. And I met a lot of great people at the Sheriff's Department who helped me out over the years with transportation issues regarding witnesses and defendants. And I'll tell you one great thing, you know, there was a guy down there, and Dan knows him well, Joe Casey, wound up being a lieutenant. There was never a defendant I had to wait for at Suffolk Superior Court. They were always there on time. I've been lucky, you know, the cases I've done over the years, I don't want to rehash them. You know, William Powers was the Sean Waters case, which was just a tremendous tragedy for the Parlon family and the Waters family and all the girls who were injured. The silver lining out of that cloud is that case was featured, and Tom Brokaw did a special on it, and it was called Sudden Impact. And to this day, people still come up to me. It showed in driving school classes, driver's ed classes, on the perils of drunk driving. And I've had a number of parents tell me that their kids have seen that video in their driver's ed classes. You know, again, you know, our greatest successes come on the heels of someone's greatest tragedy. You know, cases like William Alamany, you know, who murdered tragically, I would say, Amy Lord. I was lucky, you know, tremendous investigators assigned to that case who just did the real gritty work out there on the street, and you know, delivered to me just a great case to try in the courtroom. You know, over the years, Counselor, where
People don't know, if you can just say about Amy Lord.
Yeah, she was, she was abducted from the vestibule of her apartment in South Boston on Dorchester Street and driven around to various locations, forced to make withdrawals from her bank account before she was driven over to the Stony Brook Reservation, and where her life tragically ended. It was just, maybe one of the most important cases I ever tried for a number of reasons, but her parents, who I spoke to recently, her mom, Cindy Lord, just, the most beautiful people you would ever want to meet, strong people, gracious people, and, how they were able to navigate that and how their resolve was strengthened during the course of that trial. I don't know how they ever got through it. I'm just thankful we were able to get them the result that they were looking for on that particular case. There are a host of other cases, Counselor. I'm not, I've done a number of police-involved shootings, resulting in deaths. I started doing those. It was an opportunity bred out of necessity when I actually started doing those. I think in 2007, that's when my dad was tragically struck by a car, and my whole trial schedule, my world was just completely disrupted because he was catastrophically injured back in October 13th of 2007. I'll never forget the date, but as luck or fate would have it, I remember meeting with the district attorney, and he said, well, we have these other types of investigations that we want you to spearhead. They're not necessarily going to be, require you to be going to court every day or the grand jury, but they're going to require really, really in-depth investigation. I think I wound up doing, 2 or 3 of those in succession, and until finally I was able to get my trial feet back under me in 2010.
Well, Dan Conley documented about the state trooper, that case, and we have it here. That was, we hear those things and we just can't believe that it's really happening, So how did the Jermaine Rucker result? How did that result, that case?
That was first-degree murder conviction, and Kentel Weaver was convicted of that, and ultimately that case, believe it or not, that case wound up going to the Supreme Court of the United States on a courtroom closure issue, and I wound up going down there to see the arguments, which was just an unbelievable experience, and we prevailed on that.
Can you tell us any more about that? Your writings, that is really interesting. Inmates of Suffolk County Jail.
Yeah. I'm happy to give you a copy. I brought one today. I haven't read it in a long time, so I'm not going to autograph it, but here's a copy for you, Counselor. I've always felt I've been a good writer. I put together a piece of work that was selected for publication. It looped back into my experience at the Sheriff's Department, and I was lucky enough to have it published, and it's a piece of work I'm proud of to this day.
You said that this was the need for balance.
Right. The issue was modification of a consent decree. It had to do with the housing issues that the sheriff was wrestling with for a number of years, whether detainees should be double bunked or single bunked, and spanned, a number of years at the Charles Street Jail, and then when they ultimately opened the new facility, the Nashua Street Jail.
I think this is valuable. Perseverance pays off in battle to modify consent decree. New England Journal on criminal and civil confinement. How do you feel about bail? The changes in bail, or do you think there should be more changes?
I think it's an issue that is within the proper discretion of a judge. You see, those are issues that, day in and day out, the backbone of the system, the district courts, we have a lot of, fantastic judges in the district courts who are able to exercise their discretion on questions of bail. Things are a little more, a little tighter. There were fewer cases to consider on that issue, but, there has to be that flexibility from the bench.
I mean, there's
Whether to
people,
impose bail and when to not impose bail.
I mean, there's people that don't have the money for bail, right? And so what happens?
I don't think people should be penalized and bail should be set in a dollar amount that they can't reach. It should be commensurate with the nature and facts of the case before them, their criminal history and whether they pose, a danger, or threat to the public. And, want to make sure that if there is no bail imposed, that they're going to be coming back to court for their next court date.
But I have to tell you, the letters that we got were really, I mean, from their heart. They knew you and they knew what you have done. And I would ask the presiding counselor to, to comment in the comments that were made from the letters, because I'm violating the council's rules because I had talked too much and you had talked too much. So we went over our 15 minutes, but this is valuable. I don't want to take it from you. Do you have an extra? Oh, thank you. Thank you very much. But again, it was such a pleasure meeting with you. I am so happy that the governor appointed you. I'm glad that you applied first time. I can't believe it. And you had the age experience, everything that you've done with, in your community, in your church, with your family, and obviously in the judicial, community. You are so well respected. And I'm so pleased that I had the opportunity to take that time and that you took the time to meet with me. So
Thank you.
Congratulations.
Thank you very much.
Counselor Ino.
Thank you very much. Yeah, you have the whole package. I did get a call during the week from Dan Conley. Great deal of respect for him. He's a great guy. He's a good friend. Also, another person who called me, I spent a lot of time on the phone with him, David Eisenstadt. Great guy. Thinks the world of you. Clearly from the witnesses that I've heard today, your presentation, your counselor, Juneville, is a big supporter. I don't have any more questions. When you come before the council, I'll be more than happy to support you.
Thank you very much, Counselor. I appreciate it.
Counselor Kennedy.
Hi, John. How are you? It's good to see you. My apologies for not being there in person. It's extremely rare that I am not there in person. We don't usually put them on vacation week. We kind of have a backlog of nominees that we're trying to catch up on, and both Councilor Duff and Councilor Juneville asked if it was okay to put it on during school vacation week. My wife teaches, so that's the only time we can take some time off. I have a couple of questions for you. Obviously, we have spoken a lot. We spent a lot of time together on Friday. We spent some time on the phone, and I've known you for a couple of decades anyway. So I'm going to limit my questions. My first question is about the process that you've gone through in terms of the governor's council. How do you think that you've been treated by all the council?
I mean, me personally, fantastic. I mean, look, I haven't had the opportunity to speak with everyone. I've known Councilor Jubenville for many years. I've known you for many years, as you just stated. I've had the benefit of being in this room on I don't know how many occasions to see colleagues of mine go through the process and get elevated to the bench. So again, it's a little bit surreal for me to be sitting in this chair today and be actually going through it. But I appreciate all the time that the counselors have extended to me to answer questions and to be available and possibly to ask questions of me next week for those who aren't present or able to be here today. So if you're.
Let me ask this, John. The questions that you've been asked, the vetting you've gone through by the council, would you consider it appropriate?
Excuse me, I couldn't make that out. Can you ask me that again?
The questions and the vetting that you've gone through by the council, would you consider it appropriate?
I would, yes, yeah. I mean, I have to know.
We've received a lot of criticism in the last couple of weeks. And I just want you to comment on that in terms of the manner in which your nomination was handled by the council, if it was professional and appropriate.
I mean, one of the first calls I got was and again, I'm talking from my own experience with my host counselor, my district counselor, Mr. Jubenville. I have been treated fairly, and I've received a lot of positive feedback to the point where I would be thinking to myself, something must be wrong here. Things can't go this smoothly, but if you're asking me if I have a criticism of the process or how I've been treated, no. You know, Counselor Jubenville has been very transparent. He said, look, he wanted to get me scheduled. He knew it was a school vacation week. He knew there might be people who might not physically be able to be here. And I said, look, I'll follow your guidance. I trust your judgment on this. Whatever you think is best, you know, for my nomination and how you want to schedule the hearing.
Not about scheduling. That's a separate issue. I'm talking about in terms of the counselors that have met with you and talked with you. Would you agree with me? They've all been professional and have asked appropriate questions for a judicial nominee.
Of course I do. Yes, 100%.
Okay, fair enough. Now, I want to talk to you just a little bit about 58A hearings, which I know you're very familiar with. My first question, you come from the background of a prosecutor, okay? And I'm going to ask you if you feel that there are too many motions to have people held, both in the district and superior court, as dangerous.
Well, I think that can definitely be a concern. That can definitely be a concern. I don't have any data or statistics in front of me, but you know, I think there can be a tendency, and this is where you would probably have a concern, is that, you know, use an expression, sometimes that 58A can be like a shiny new toy for prosecutors.
I've never heard that before, but I'll use it in the future.
And at the end of the day, Counselor, you know, you still have to be able to present the evidence. I believe the standard on 58A is clear and convincing evidence has to be presented that the person may present a danger to the community. And, you know, look, if they're overused.
And there are no other alternatives to
Correct.
incarceration.
Thank you. Correct. And look, all I can say is if I'm in a busy first session or an arraignment session in Superior Court, and I get the sense that they're being overused or it's a tool in a prosecutor's toolbox that's being overused or misused, you know, I would be sure to take some action on it.
Should they be used as a punitive measure? Because it seems to me, more in the district court than the Superior Court where you're going, that they're almost used as a pretrial punitive measure. Should that happen?
No, it shouldn't happen. I mean, everything, you know, whenever a pleading like that is filed and, you know, someone's liberty is at stake, you know, as a judge, whether you're in district court or Superior Court, you know, you want to make sure that, look, this is not a punitive measure. It's based on the evidence, the credible evidence that can be presented to a court, whether it's through live testimony or police reports.
Okay, and well, police reports are a problem because you know, they contain a lot of hearsay. I know it's admissible, but you can't weigh the credibility of a witness based on what is written in the police report. Fair to say?
Yep, sure, fair to say. And as a judge, I mean, I think you could request, you know, look, you're not going to accept just the, you know, the four corners of a police report or an affidavit, that you're going to require some live testimony so that you can, you know, get a better assessment, you know, of what a witness or what the state of the evidence might be if a prosecutor is moving on a dangerousness hearing.
Okay, and I'll go back to my original question. Do you think that they are overused by prosecutors?
I don't.
I know you're a prosecutor.
I am.
For a while.
I haven't been in district court in probably 26 years. So
I understand.
I'll take your word for it that they can be overused, and that is definitely a concern.
And do you know what happens when they're overused? A young prosecutor usually files a motion in the case. And what happens to that defendant as soon as they file a motion?
Well, I don't know, but I'll tell you
Well,
what I do know,
they're
what
taking it-
happens if,
I can tell you, they're taken into custody for 3 days.
and I
Sometimes,
think, okay,
sometimes they're taken into custody on a case that they would never do any time on. And then 3 days later, the prosecutor stands up and says, we can agree to conditions of release. But then someone their liberty was taken away. They're put in a cage for 3 days while they're awaiting a decision on this. Do you think that's right? Happens all over the state all the time.
well, I mean, my practice has been limited to Suffolk County, so I'm not going to doubt it. I know you have a very busy, practice and you appear frequently in the district court, so I'm not going to doubt that, but I'm telling you, my feeling is that if I were in a session and I felt, the tendency if a prosecutor overuses that tool, moving for dangerousness, I think it has the tendency to really lose its effect. And
I lost you. I don't know if you folks can hear me. I'll sign back on.
you know,
John? I don't know if you can, I don't know if you folks can hear me, but I lost.
Terry, it was, the nominee was for
exemplary for this position.
I'm back on if you can hear me. I lost you for a moment.
Go ahead.
Okay. Anyway, I'm gonna cut to the chase. Have you read the governor's bill on 58 days to expand their use?
It's not a joke. They shouldn't allow
I don't know. I haven't read it recently, Counselor. I'll tell you this. When I was district attorney back in 2018, I did testify before the Judiciary Committee in favor of that bill back, I think it was in 2018, I'm fairly certain. Late 2018.
There are parts of that bill that we all agree with, dealing with things like child pornography and child abuse cases. I don't have an issue with that portion of it. But what about the fact that a prosecutor can walk into court on any given day during the course of a trial for whatever reason and file a 58A for a dangerousness hearing? Do you think that should happen? Because that's what the bill says.
Meaning after the date of arraignment?
Yep. And then the person's locked up again for 3 days, away from their family, away from their homes, away from their jobs.
Yeah, I don't know if, I haven't read the bill, but I don't know if.
Well, you read it.
Does it require a change in circumstances? I would imagine there would have to be some change in circumstances that would have to be presented to the court after.
The change in circumstances is always there on a bail issue. You can always revisit bail if there's some kind of change in circumstances. Agreed?
I'm not following.
Well, if for example, if somebody gets arrested while they're on bail, you can move for a bail revocation, right?
Right. Okay.
If somebody violates the terms of their release, you can always revoke their bail, right?
Correct.
So why do we need another tool that allows them to automatically be held for 3 days, put in a cage for 3 days? Because for whatever reason, a prosecutor feels that somebody's not in compliance or feels that it's appropriate to bring a dangerousness hearing later, a motion for dangerousness later in the process. Why do we have to change that?
Trying to be responsive as I can to the question, and you cut out for a little bit, but,
Yeah, by the way, this is probably the second time I've appeared on WebEx. I don't like it. I'm not going to do it again. I don't agree with it. I only did it because of the unusual circumstance where we have a hearing on school vacation week, and I apologize again for that, but go ahead.
Apology necessary. I mean, to me, if I'm sitting in a session and, there's an arraignment and 3 days later, someone's moving for dangerousness, I just think it goes without saying that there has to be some significant change in circumstances for the prosecution to meet its burden.
Okay, but they don't have to meet their burden on that day. They only have to file a motion, and then you're holding them for 3 days.
Oh, until the hearing can be scheduled?
Yeah.
Okay.
You think that's right? Most judges take the position they have no discretion.
I don't know, it's a tough question.
I don't think it's.
I'm sorry, but I really don't know how to
I
answer
don't think
that
it's a
one.
tough question. I think it's an easy answer, John. I think the answer is very simple. That should not be part of the bill. So if somebody is dangerous at the beginning of the case, they file a motion at the beginning of the case. I don't agree the person should necessarily be held absent without a very strong, valid reason. And then you can have your hearing. But to do it during the process of the case going through the process, I completely disagree with this. Already remedies in place to handle that situation. But that's just my view. All of that said, you don't have to comment on it any further. All that said, as I indicated earlier, I've known you for decades. You are one of the most decent human beings I've ever met in my life. You're one of the finest lawyers I ever met in my life, and you're probably one of the most reasonable people I ever met in my life. And you are going, and certainly in my professional life, and you are going to be a great Superior Court judge, and I'll be voting for you next week. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Counselor. Counselor Duff.
Thank you very much. Yeah, as I said, your resume and background, it says Superior Court all over it to me. You could serve in many capacities in our judicial system, but to me, this is just a great fit. You've worked on major felony cases. Have you had any work on labor disputes or things like that?
No.
Injunctive relief and things like that, no. And do you think you don't know whether you're gonna be in a civil or a.
I imagine, Counselor, that pretty soon, if I'm lucky enough to get confirmed next week, that in a fairly short time after I'm sworn in, I'll wind up in a civil session.
Mm-hmm.
And I will do what I've done over the course of my career. I will work hard. I will work hard to understand the issues, understand the law, be able to apply the law to the facts, and rely on my colleagues, which is what I did, for many, many years, and continue to do to this day when there's something that comes across my desk that I'm not entirely familiar with. So to be sure, there's going to be a pretty steep learning curve. I'm not going to sit here and offer testimony that I'm going to be adept from day one in a civil session. It's going to require a lot of hard work, and there's going to be a steep learning curve, but I'm up to the challenge.
I believe you are, and I don't expect, it would be nice if we got somebody came in with every single thing. But, that's the unicorn, and we don't always get that, and I don't expect it. What I hope for, and what I do expect, and I'm hopeful with you, is that you are open-minded, you're clearly intellectually curious, you ask questions. I find, I'm not an attorney, I'm a public policy person, the law I worked on when I was in DC was telecommunications and very technical intellectual property things and stuff like that. So this is different. But and all of us love, the felony and the criminal stuff. It's exciting in so many ways and everything. But the grit in the detail, to me, especially in the labor stuff, in civil is fascinating. I sat on a jury for a civil case in Superior Court. It was so educational. Absolutely fascinating stuff. What I would ask of you, if you do ascend to the bench, is that you're mindful and careful with your jury instructions, no matter what session you're in. I have a constituent whose father was a police officer and brutally murdered while off duty, assisting a citizen. And this happened many, many, many years ago. But and it happened when this fellow was a teenager, and he's a grown man now. It has affected his life and his children's life forever. This man's murderer got off on a technicality because the jury was not given the right instructions. And then unfortunately went on to murder other people. He is a man, a constituent that I stay in touch with. He is very different than I am. He thinks differently. His political views are very different. But he brings to my attention things that need to be brought to my attention because he thinks differently. And he's made me think differently. And I appreciate that because we're not all the same, nor should we be. How boring would the world be? I'm not somebody who really cares about sensation. I don't like hearing all the crazy stuff, and it's just not. I want everything just to be, but I do ask you to be, and I think by your nature that you would be, but try to be mindful while you're on the bench if you assent to it. It's not just the life of the person there. It's, this murder that happened in the unintended consequence because of a verbal instruction that was not done with malice. It was a mistake. It has affected generations. And that is the ominous responsibility of being a judge. Now, it seems to me from the testimony of folks who've dealt with you in times of deep and serious crisis that you have that mindfulness about you. What I do ask of you and your family and your support that's in this room today is that they continue to support you emotionally, spiritually, in every way they can, because you have already had a career where you have seen and dealt with horrific, horrific things. Bless you for that, and thank you for all of you that do that work, because I don't know that I could endure it myself. But you're about maybe embarking on something even deeper than that. And it is important that you stay strong and that you have the support of your family and community. And you may make an unpopular decision at some point. You may make a mistake. But more than that, you might say something or do something that people don't understand because they didn't see the evidence that you saw, because you're the judge. Just like you fellas that are in the DA's office and everything. We're not privy, nor should we be. That's why we have you. This stuff. And in my district, we had a Superior Court judge who made a ruling that was very unpopular. I'm not sure I agreed with it, but he's the judge. He was the judge. People picketed in front of the court. People picketed in front of his home. They threatened him. They threatened his family. They threatened the employees of that court. And I think that's disgraceful. I think that's disgraceful. And I think it should not be done. You can disagree with somebody in a different manner than that. I spent an entire day in Salem Superior Court speaking to every single employee about, frankly, the trauma they had been subjected to from a bunch of protesters who just didn't understand or like a decision. It's democracy, right? Mm-hmm. And be ready for that. And your family needs to be ready to support you in that. And that is something that, because I witnessed it and I saw what it did to people that I consider that's one of my courts, I'm very protective of it. And like I said, I don't know why the judge said what he did or did what he did. It doesn't matter. Separation of powers. That's what we're based on. Oldest constitution in the world, right here in Massachusetts. It's why we are the best. It's why, despite what people say about this council, this is the best way of doing it. Some people might like histrionics. Some people might like drama. Some people might like other things. But at the end of the day, we are charged with putting the best people that we can that are presented to us forward. And I think you are a fine candidate.
Thank you.
I really do. Everything I've heard about you, the one flaw that you have is you have not been to Greece. And, and your family came here, and I urge you to rectify that issue. And I'm sure I've gone over my time with my diatribe, but thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Counselor.
Counselor Hurley, are you on the, whatever it is?
I'm on WebEx. I don't know if anybody can see me or not. Something's been
We can hear you. Go
bad
ahead.
today.
Go ahead.
Well, in any event, one of the reasons that we changed the rules and I supported it was because you could have one counselor literally taking up 2 hours with questions and speeches while everybody else just sat there. And I'm the last one before Counselor Dubinville to be able to ask questions. In your case, after having reviewed your application and having checked you out with some folks down in the Boston area, there is no doubt, there is no question that you are a superb candidate and that you're going to do a great job. So I really don't have any questions for you. And my only comment would be that it's not very often that I hear Bob Jubenville saying nice things about prosecutors.
True
But in this particular case, he was ecstatic, thought that you were going to do a great job. And for Counselor Jubenville to cross to the other side momentarily in support of a prosecutor is pretty impressive in my book. So I don't have any questions. I think you're going to do a great job, and I'm going to vote for you. Thank you.
Thank you, Counselor.
Thank you, Counselor. That's all we got, right? So let me just follow up a little bit on Counselor Kennedy's dangerousness hearing topic. What I find in some counties is a person will be arrested and at arraignment, they file a motion for the dangerousness. They're held for 3 days. And in some cases, it's allowed and they're held for 4 months. And what I find, the cases aren't that complicated, but some DA's offices wait until the last couple of weeks of that 4 months before they get the indictment. And then, of course, they're arraigned in the indictment and a whole new dangerousness hearing is asked for. And then the person, if they're held for 6 months. So it seems to be in some counties happening all too often that they're getting 10 months of incarceration out of it by playing the system that way. So I know you as a judge don't have a lot of say in that once they file it and they're held for the 3 days. But I'd ask you to take into consideration, if that scenario happens, as to whether or not there's more of a chance that somebody would be released on some sort of conditions. If you see that happening in the county you happen to be sitting in. It can't just be by happenstance, in my opinion anyway. The other pet peeve I have is the guidelines in the Superior Court. For just the topic of guidelines. So the reason why I'm not a fan of guidelines is I've seen, well, probably 20 years or more of the draconian nature of guidelines as was done in our federal system. And I don't think there's many people that would disagree with me in saying that they were used like a sledgehammer to people, that people will put in jail. I know of one case where a fellow with no record got involved in selling marijuana, and his business flourished, so did the marijuana. And under the guidelines, he spent 18 and a half years in the federal prison for that. And with all of that that's happened down in that building by the water, I say, why would we ever bring a system like that into our system? I don't know how you feel about guidelines. Maybe you want to tell us.
Well, that's what they've been in Massachusetts since I've been a prosecutor is guidelines. There's no statutory scheme, sentencing scheme that has to be followed. So, where there's no minimum mandatory involved, it's still a discretionary call for the judge on sentencing. We still do have minimum mandatory. So, until there's some type of legislative action addressing the crimes that do have minimum mandatory sentences, I would be constrained. I can't abrogate my duty as a judge. I have to follow the law. But I think on those cases that don't have minimum mandatories, I have a wide range of discretion, and I can learn a lot from a defense attorney and in probation about a particular individual before any type of sentence is imposed.
Judge Harrington in the federal court, my opinion, a wonderful judge, refused to take criminal cases because in those years you had to follow guidelines. And he refused to sentence anybody under them. He said, we've been sentencing people since this started in 1780 by going through different topics like his record and his background and the victim and the crime, and all of those things were into the pot. And he said that he wanted to continue that system. So guidelines, as I understand them, are to make somebody that commits a crime, A, in Suffolk County, with no record, get sentenced. And that person who commits the same crime in Pittsfield with no record gets the same sentence. So, to me, one size has never fit all.
I would agree with that, Counselor. And one of the things, one of the good things about my job when I was chief trial counsel and when Pat Hagan was the first assistant is we would do a lot of the screening on particular cases. So, under District Attorney Conley, he gave us the discretion to do that. So, a lot of the times we would screen out cases where we didn't feel that they were appropriate for a minimum mandatory sentence. There was just no justification for it. And a perfect example of that is, a female drug trafficker who's actually the lowest rung on the ladder acting as the mule, and she's trafficking 100 grams of heroin or fentanyl and is looking at, a double-digit minimum mandatory. Our approach, for many, many years on many, many cases, is like, look, we have to make an accurate charging decision now before this ever gets into the courtroom, because once you get into the courtroom, you're going to tie the judge's hands. So I don't know, I don't know what other counties do. I know that, under District Attorney Conley, we were very flexible, had a lot of flexibility, and had a lot of ability to exercise discretion on charging before the case was ever indicted. And that's where, I wouldn't just say our office. I think we did a really good job of it. Of course, I'm biased, but I think every office has to put a premium on charging decisions.
Unfortunately,
you have your stats and you see what happens in the courtroom, and I'm not going to sit here and quarrel with you on those cases that you've seen. They're true, and a lot of them are terrible outcomes. What we never got credit for is the cases that are actually screened out, where you can get the case into the system, where there'll be two things accomplished. There'll be a level of accountability, but there'll be, you'll leave the judge with some wiggle room to fashion an appropriate sentence. So, your point's well taken.
Unfortunately, not all counties do that. They're quick to charge the highest they can charge and bind a judge's hands. Unfortunately. But they ran up against a Superior Court judge who saw somebody standing in front of her She's a little bit of a judge, about 5 feet tall. And she said, this person it is not fair for me to have to sentence this person to 10 years minimum mandatory sentence. And I've heard people sit in the chair you're in say to me, oh, I'm going to be fair, I'm going to be fair. Well, she did something about it when she saw and said to herself, this is highly unfair for me to do this. She didn't do it. She sentenced him to 2 years in the House of Correction. It was appealed, obviously, and it was overturned, and the person was sentenced to the 10 years by another judge. But think about it. If judges did that in the Superior Court, it wouldn't be a day or 48 hours before the legislature did something about it. Unfortunately, we don't have the caliber of courage in a lot of judges to do something like that. And of course, she couldn't be fired for that or suspended. But she made a statement, and I would, if more judges made that statement, there wouldn't be some of these unfair sentences just because of overcharging. The thing with the guidelines, though, even though they say they're advisory, it seems to me that they are the starting point of the discussion with the judge. If they're good for the prosecutors, they use them. If they're good for the defense lawyers, they use them. But they're the starting point, it seems to me. Once they're thrown out in the mix, you know, if the DA says, well, the guidelines are 5 years, now we're talking about that as far as where we go from there. And I know they're advisory, but me, if I was a judge, and I'm only talking about me, if they were brought up, I'd say, whoa, whoa, I don't want to hear them. Tell me why, what your sentence is, and tell me why. And the same with the defense attorney. I don't want any guidelines. I can sentence somebody without guidelines. You know, I've been practicing a long time. I've never walked into a clerk's office and saw a big file sitting there that was kind of shop worn. And I say to the clerk, oh, what's this? Well, we're waiting that case. We just can't figure out how to sentence the guy. I've never seen that. I don't think it's ever happened in the history of our court system. Any event, that's my take on that. You know, I have a very strong opinion of you. You were a great lawyer. Tried many cases. And one of the attributes of a good judge, according to Judge Hennessy, the Superior Court chief many years ago, he wrote a book about it. And he said one of the best qualities that makes a judge is litigation experience in a courtroom. You have that. You have something better than that. You have kindness. You don't take pride in sending people to jail. Sometimes it's got to be done. Unlike 2 DAs I saw one day many years ago after a verdict of guilty, high-five each other in the courtroom, as if this was some sort of sporting event. And you know and I know it isn't. There's no winners in those rooms. There's losers. Everybody loses in there. But you have never taken pleasure in that or bragged about your sending people to jail, which I think is a wonderful quality. And you're going into a new role now. And a lot of your friends on the DA's office may come before you, and you have to now rule in a different way sometimes. And I have no doubt in my mind that you will do that. So with that said, I think you're going to be a wonderful judge, and we'll, I think, vote on you next week.
Counselor.
It'll be my pleasure to vote yes. Okay, hearing adjourned. Hearing adjourned.
The letters into the record that we received,
Hearing adjourned. Thank you.
the letters that we received.
It's submitted.